This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I've been hesitating to write this down for weeks now, but I need to get it off my chest. I still have nightmares about it, and the marks on my arm have finally faded, but the memory hasn't. I'm not someone who believes in paranormal stuff, or at least I wasn't. I'm a biology major, for crying out loud. Everything has a logical explanation. That's what I kept telling myself. It happened about a month ago when I was staying over at my friend Madison's house in Lakeview. We've been friends since freshman orientation 3 years ago. And we often have these casual sleepovers where we just hang out, watch movies, and talk about classes and dating disasters. Madison's house is this old 2-story place her parents bought when they moved here. It's got that creaky charm, you know, the kind that's cute during the day but gets a little eerie at night. That evening started like any other. We ordered pizza, complained about our evolutionary biology professor, and Madison was showing me these weird TikTok videos about paranormal challenges. I remember rolling my eyes as she scrolled through them. People actually believe this crap? I laughed, taking another slice of pepperoni. Like, seriously? Ghosts that respond to you saying their name 3 times in a mirror? Madison grinned, putting her phone down. I know, right? But what if some of it is real? Haven't you ever wondered? Yeah, and I've also wondered if unicorns poop rainbows, I replied, making her snort soda through her nose. We kept joking about it as the night went on, and I think that's where things started to go wrong. Madison has always been more open to this stuff than me. Not that she actually believed in it, but she liked to entertain the possibility. I was the hardcore skeptic between us. Around midnight, we were sitting cross-legged on her bed, the room only lit by her bedside lamp and the glow of her laptop screen. The house was quiet. Her parents were away for the weekend visiting her brother at his college. Let's try something, Madison suddenly said, a mischievous glint in her eye. Try what? I asked, already suspicious. You know, just for fun. Let's see if there's anything here. She straightened her back and cleared her throat dramatically. If there are any spirits present in this room, give us a sign. I rolled my eyes so hard I probably saw my own brain. Maddie, come on. Shh. She waved her hand at me, trying not to laugh herself. I'm communing with the other side, she continued in this exaggerated, spooky voice. If anyone is here with us, could you please move something in this room? Maybe knock a picture off the wall or turn off the light? We both giggled like we were 12 instead of 21. The room remained still and silent. See, I said, dead people have better things to do than hang out with college students on a Friday night. Madison wasn't deterred. Maybe they're shy. Hey, spirits, we're not afraid of you. You can show yourself. Move my water bottle on the desk if you're here. I was about to make another sarcastic comment when it happened. The water bottle, one of those metal reusable ones, tipped over and rolled off her desk with a loud clang on the hardwood floor. We both jumped. Madison's eyes went wide, and I felt my heart skip a beat before my brain kicked in. It was already close to the edge, I said quickly. And it's almost empty, so the weight distribution was off. Plus, this old house probably has uneven floors. Madison looked at me, her expression a mix of excitement and uncertainty. Maybe. Just then, the bedside lamp flickered. Once, twice, 3 times, before returning to normal. And that's just faulty wiring, I added, though my voice didn't sound as confident as I wanted it to. Madison was getting excited now. What if it's not, though? What if someone's actually responding to us? Maddie. But she was already continuing her one-sided conversation with the empty room. Thank you for showing us you're here. Can you do something else? Something bigger? I was starting to feel uncomfortable, not scared, I still didn't believe. But there was this weird tension in the air that was making the hair on my arms stand up. Madison, maybe we should just watch that movie now, I suggested. She ignored me. If you're really here, maybe you could touch one of us. Just a light touch, to let us know you exist. You have my permission. You don't have mine, I half joked, but there was an edge to my voice that made Madison finally look at me. Relax, Zoe, nothing's going to happen. It's just for fun. Well, it's not fun anymore, I said. Can we please just drop it and watch something? Madison seemed to realize I was genuinely getting uncomfortable. Fine, fine. Sorry for freaking you out, Ms. Skeptic. I'm not freaked out, I lied. I just think it's stupid. We eventually put on some Netflix comedy special, and the weird moment passed. We laughed, finished our snacks, and eventually fell asleep around 2 in the morning. I crashed on the air mattress on her floor, bundled up in my sleeping bag. I woke up early the next morning, around 7. Madison was still asleep, so I quietly gathered my stuff and headed out. We had planned it that way since I had a study group at 11. I texted her that I'd left and would talk to her later. The whole ghost thing was already fading from my mind by the time I got back to my apartment. I had a roommate, but she was visiting her boyfriend for the weekend, so I had the place to myself. I took a shower, made some coffee, and spent a couple hours reviewing notes for my study group. Everything was completely normal. I didn't feel watched or scared or any of that horror movie crap. There were no cold spots in my apartment, no strange noises, nothing. I went to bed early that night, exhausted from the late night at Madison's and my study session. I don't remember dreaming anything unusual, just normal, forgettable dreams. The next morning, Sunday, I woke up around 9 and stretched, feeling pretty good. I rolled out of bed and headed to the bathroom to brush my teeth. That's when I saw them. In the mirror's reflection, I noticed something dark on my left arm. When I looked down, I froze. There were 3 long, thin scratches running from my elbow almost to my wrist. They weren't deep, but they were definitely there. Red, slightly raised, and impossible to miss. But that wasn't all. Around the scratches was a pattern of small bruises, like someone had gripped my arm tightly with their fingers. I stood there, toothbrush halfway to my mouth, just staring at my arm. I tried to remember if I'd scratched myself in my sleep, or maybe hit my arm on something at Madison's house or during the study group, but I couldn't recall anything that would explain marks like these. The scratches looked fresh, like they'd happened overnight, and the bruises, they were in the shape of fingerprints. Small fingerprints. A chill ran through me, but I pushed away the creeping thought trying to form. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe I'd done it to myself in my sleep. I checked my fingernails. They were short, and I couldn't reach my arm at that angle anyway. Maybe I'd gotten tangled in my sheets and twisted my arm, but that wouldn't explain the scratches. I took a picture of my arm and sent it to Madison with the message, "Did I hurt myself at your place somehow? Woke up with this." She replied a few minutes later, "WTF? No, you were fine when you left. That looks nasty. What happened?" "I don't know," I texted back. "I just woke up like this." There was a pause before her next message came through. "Maybe our ghost friend paid you a visit." That's when it hit me. Madison's words from Friday night echoed in my head. "If you're really here, maybe you could touch one of us. Just a light touch to let us know you exist. You have my permission." My stomach dropped. You have my permission, not our permission. I had specifically said they didn't have mine. "Not funny, Madison," I texted back, my hands shaking slightly. "Sorry, bad joke. For real though, maybe you should get it checked out if you don't know where it came from." I didn't respond. I was too busy trying to calm my racing heart and the ridiculous thoughts spinning in my head. This was absurd. I was a rational person. There had to be a logical explanation. But as the day went on, I couldn't find one. I checked every corner of my apartment for something sharp I might have caught my arm on. I examined my sheets and mattress. Nothing. I even asked my roommate when she got back if she'd noticed anything in our apartment that could cause scratches like that. The marks didn't hurt much, just a mild stinging, but I couldn't stop looking at them. The pattern was so deliberate, 3 parallel lines like claws and those finger-shaped bruises. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Madison's stupid game, about how I'd explicitly said, "You don't have my permission," while she had given hers. I know it sounds ridiculous. I know it does, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me home, something that Madison had invited to touch us, but that I had rejected. Had it targeted me because I was the skeptic, because I denied it permission? I left all the lights on in my apartment and stayed up until dawn, jumping at every creak and settling noise. Nothing happened, but the next night was the same, and the next. The scratches have healed now, leaving faint pink lines that are barely visible. The bruises faded after about a week, but I still sleep with the lights on. I still wake up sometimes with the feeling of pressure on my arm, right where those marks were. Madison thinks I'm overreacting. She's convinced I must have scratched myself on something and just don't remember. Maybe she's right. That's what the rational part of my brain keeps insisting. But another part of me, a part I never knew existed until that night, isn't so sure. Because the thing is, permission matters, consent matters, and whatever happened that night, whatever left those marks on my arm, I never gave it permission to touch me. I don't know what to believe anymore. All I know is that I'll never mock those paranormal games again. And if Madison ever suggests trying something during our sleepovers, I'll be sleeping somewhere else that night. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed again. And I think Madison opened one for both of us, whether I wanted her to or not. Story 2. I still get goosebumps thinking about what happened that night at Thomas's place. It's been 3 years, but I can't shake it. I've tried telling a few people, but they either think I'm making it up or that we were just high teenagers seeing things. We weren't. I know what I saw, what we all saw. Thomas lived on this old Air Force base that had been converted into housing. His mom got the place cheap, which made sense once you knew the history. The previous tenant had hung himself in the garage. Actually, the whole base had a dark history. There'd been an unusual number of suicides there over the years. People would joke about it being haunted, but no one really took it seriously. At least I didn't, until that night. It was just supposed to be a normal sleepover. Me, Lucas, Ethan, Mike, Danny, and Thomas hanging out, playing video games, eating junk food, the usual stuff. Thomas's mom was working night shift, so we had the place to ourselves until around midnight when she'd come back to check on us. We were in the middle of a Halo tournament when we heard this weird tapping at the glass back door. It was around 10:30 at night. At first we thought it was just a branch or something, but it had this strange rhythm to it. Tap, 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 tap. What the hell is that? Mike asked, pausing the game. Thomas got up and walked toward the kitchen, which led to the back door. Probably just the wind or something. We all followed him, curious but also feeling this weird tension building. The house had sliding glass doors that led out to a small concrete patio with a tall wooden fence around it. The light above the door was burned out, so Thomas flipped on the kitchen light, which illuminated part of the patio. As we approached the door, I remember getting this heavy feeling in my chest, like someone had placed a weight on me. Danny was the first to actually look outside. "Holy shit," he whispered, stumbling backward. We all pushed forward to see what had freaked him out. That's when I saw her, a girl standing on the patio, facing away from us. She was wearing what looked like a dirty white dress, and her hair was long and matted. I couldn't see her face at first, but something about her posture was just wrong. She was standing too still, like she wasn't even breathing. "Maybe she needs help," Thomas whispered, reaching for the door handle. Mike grabbed his arm. "Don't you dare open that door, man." As if she heard us, the girl slowly turned around. I'll never forget what I saw. Her face was cut up. Not like movie gore or anything, but these thin, precise cuts all over her face, like someone had taken a razor to her. But there was no blood. The cuts were just there. Deep and open, but dry. Her eyes looked empty, completely void of any emotion or recognition. We all froze. I couldn't even breathe. She didn't approach the door or try to communicate. She just stared at us for what felt like forever, but was probably only a few seconds. Then she moved to the back of the patio near the fence and turned to face us again. "Should we call the police?" Danny whispered. Before anyone could answer, we heard a car pull into the driveway. Thomas recognized his mom's car. "She's early," he said, his voice shaking. "Don't tell her about this yet. She'll freak out." We quickly moved away from the door but kept glancing back. The girl was still there, just standing and staring. When Thomas's mom came in through the front door, she had this massive German shepherd with her. It belonged to her boyfriend, and she'd picked it up to take for a walk in the morning. The moment the dog entered the house, it went nuts. It started growling low and deep, then pacing back and forth in front of the back door. But weirdly, it wasn't barking, just this continuous threatening growl. Its hackles were raised, and it wouldn't leave that spot by the door. "What's wrong with Rex?" Thomas's mom asked, trying to pull the dog away. "No idea," Thomas lied, avoiding looking at the patio. His mom tried to get the dog to calm down, but it wouldn't budge. She didn't notice the girl on the patio. From her angle in the kitchen, the reflection on the glass would have made it hard to see outside. After about 15 minutes of trying to settle the dog, she gave up. "He's acting so strange. Maybe he's picking up on another animal outside," she said. "I'm going to take him to Jimmy's place. I'll be back later. Don't do anything stupid while I'm gone." As soon as she left with the dog, we all rushed back to the door. The girl was gone. "Where did she go?" Mike asked, pressing his face against the glass. We searched the patio with our eyes, but saw nothing. That's when Ethan spoke up. Ethan had always been the sensitive one in our group. His mom was into all that spiritual stuff, and he'd picked up some of it. "There's something still out there," he said quietly. "I can feel it." I had always been a bit intuitive too, though I didn't talk about it much. But right then, I knew Ethan was right. There was something in the air, a heaviness that hadn't been there before. "We should check it out," I said, surprising myself. "Are you insane?" Danny nearly shouted. "Did you not see that girl's face?" "She's gone now," I said, though I wasn't sure why I was pushing this. "But something feels unfinished." Ethan nodded. "Lucas is right. We should at least look around. Whatever it is, it's still here." Mike and Danny wanted nothing to do with it, so they stayed inside, while Thomas reluctantly agreed to join Ethan and me on the patio. Thomas grabbed a baseball bat from his room before we went out, which didn't make me feel any safer. The night air was unexpectedly cold for summer and completely still. No breeze, no sounds of insects or distant traffic, just silence. The three of us stood on the patio, listening and feeling. "Let's try something," Ethan suggested. "Let's sit down and just be aware, like a meditation." It sounded weird, but we were already in weird territory. We sat in a triangle on the concrete, facing outward. Thomas kept the bat across his lap, his knuckles white from gripping it. We closed our eyes and just focused on our breathing for a few minutes. I don't know how long we sat there, but gradually I started to hear something, a small scurrying sound coming from behind the fence, like a rabbit or small animal moving quickly. I didn't say anything at first, thinking it was just my imagination. Then Ethan spoke. "Do you guys hear that?" Thomas shook his head, but I nodded, like something small running around. "Yeah," Ethan confirmed, "but it's not an animal, it's something else." As he said this, I saw a shadow move through the slats in the fence, not over or under, but through, as if the fence wasn't solid. We all stood up quickly. Thomas raised his bat, pointing it toward the fence. "What the hell was that?" "We need to look over the fence," I said, feeling strangely calm despite my racing heart. The fence was about 7 feet tall, so Thomas grabbed a plastic chair from the patio. I climbed up and peered over into the alley behind the house. It was a clear night with a full moon, so the alley was well lit with that silvery moonlight. Everything should have been visible. What I saw defies explanation, even now. In the middle of the alley, about 20 feet from the fence, was a spot of darkness. Not just shadow, but something darker than dark. A void that seemed to absorb the moonlight around it. It was roughly the size of a basketball, but its edges weren't clear. It seemed to radiate shadow, like an inverse light source. Nothing in nature could cast a shadow like that, especially not on a night with full moonlight directly overhead. "Ethan, you need to see this," I whispered, not taking my eyes off the spot. Ethan climbed up next to me, balancing precariously on the chair. His breath caught when he saw it. "What is it?" Thomas hissed from below. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "It's like a hole in reality." The dark spot wasn't moving, just hovering about a foot off the ground. The area around it seemed distorted somehow, like looking through heat waves, but it was cold outside. "We should throw something at it," Ethan suggested. "Are you crazy?" I whispered, but even as I said it, I was scanning the patio for something to throw. Ethan climbed down and found a small garden trowel that was sitting by some potted plants. He climbed back up and, without hesitation, threw it directly at the dark spot. The moment the trowel approached the darkness, the spot moved. Not like anything I've ever seen move before. It didn't roll or fly or jump. It just relocated instantly in a zigzag pattern down the alley. The movement was so sudden and unnatural that both Ethan and I fell backward off the chair. At that exact moment, every dog in the neighborhood started barking. Not just barking, howling, yelping, going absolutely berserk. It was like they all sensed the wrongness of what just happened. Thomas helped us up, his face pale. "What happened? What did you see?" "It moved," Ethan said, his voice trembling. "Like nothing I've ever seen. Not like an animal or a person. Like it teleported, but in this weird zigzag pattern." "We need to get the trowel," I said, suddenly feeling that it was important. "No way I'm going out there," Thomas said. "We don't have to go into the alley," I explained. "We can go around the front and look from the street." After some argument, we agreed to go together. We went through the house, past Mike and Danny, who were huddled on the couch pretending nothing was happening, and out the front door. We walked quickly to the end of the block and turned down the alley. The dark spot was gone, but we found the trowel about 30 feet from where Ethan had thrown it. It was stuck in the ground, blade first, as if it had been forcefully driven into the dirt. It shouldn't have been possible for it to land like that from the angle Ethan had thrown it. None of us slept that night. We stayed together in Thomas's living room, lights on, talking in hushed voices about what we'd seen. We tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was some weird optical illusion or a rare atmospheric phenomenon. Deep down, we all knew it wasn't anything natural. The next day, as we were leaving, I swear I could hear whispers following me. Not words exactly, just the sensation of something communicating just below the threshold of hearing. Ethan felt it too. He texted me later that day. "It's following us." I've been researching ever since, trying to figure out what we encountered that night. The closest thing I've found is descriptions of shadow people or void entities in paranormal literature, but nothing quite matches what we saw. We still get together sometimes, the 5 of us, but we never go back to Thomas's place. Thomas moved out a year later. His mom couldn't afford the place anymore, she said, but I think it was more than that. I still hear the whispers sometimes, especially at night when I'm alone, and sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I catch glimpses of something darker than darkness. Whatever we saw that night, I think it noticed us too, and I don't think it's done with us. Story 3. I still can't sleep well at night, even 3 years later. What happened to me at that hotel in Tijuana has burned itself into my brain in a way I can't shake off. I've told this story to a few close friends, and they either think I'm making it up or that I had some kind of vivid nightmare, but I know what I experienced was real. It was summer 2019. Me, my boyfriend Marco, and our 3-year-old son Diego had been visiting my extended family in central Mexico for 2 weeks. We were driving back to our home in San Diego, but we got a late start leaving my aunt's place. By the time we reached Tijuana, it was already getting dark, and a massive rainstorm had rolled in, the kind where you can barely see 2 feet in front of your windshield. Marco suggested we just get a hotel for the night rather than risk crossing the border in that weather with our exhausted toddler. It made sense. Diego was cranky and overtired, and the border wait would probably be hours in that weather. The problem was, apparently, everyone else had the same idea. We tried 5 different hotels near the border, and they were all completely booked. I was getting really frustrated. Diego was crying in his car seat, and Marco was getting that tight look around his eyes that meant he was trying not to snap at both of us. Finally, we found this hotel. I don't even remember the name now, which is weird because I remember every other detail of that night so vividly. It was this tall, narrow building, maybe 8 or 9 floors, kind of squeezed between 2 other buildings. It looked older than the others we'd tried. The lobby had this dated 90s vibe with fake plants and scratched marble floors. The front desk guy told us we were lucky. They had exactly 1 room left on the 6th floor. At that point, I would have taken anything. We paid cash, which should have been another red flag. They didn't want card, got our key, and dragged our overnight bags and half-asleep toddler to the elevator. The 6th floor hallway was quiet, too quiet, like I couldn't hear any sounds from other rooms at all. The carpet was this ugly brownish pattern that had probably been there for decades, and the lighting was dim with several bulbs burnt out. Our room was at the very end of the hall. As soon as Marco unlocked the door and we stepped inside, a wall of heat hit us. The room was unbearably hot, like someone had cranked the heat up to maximum. Diego immediately started whining and pulling at his clothes. "What the hell?" Marco muttered, going straight to the air conditioner unit under the window. He fiddled with it for a minute before announcing it was completely dead. I was already annoyed and called the front desk. The guy sounded bored when he told me maintenance had left for the day and couldn't come until morning. When I complained about the heat being unbearable, especially with a toddler, he just said, "Open a window, Senora." Except the windows only opened about 3 inches, not enough to cool the sauna we were standing in. After arguing with the front desk guy for 10 minutes and threatening to demand our money back, he finally said they might have 1 other room available on the 1st floor. "Why didn't you offer that before?" I snapped. "It's not a room we usually give to guests," he said, which was weird. "It's near the maintenance closet and an exit door. People complain about the noise." At that point, I didn't care. A noisy room was better than heat stroke. So we packed up our stuff again, dragged our now fully awake and cranky toddler back to the elevator, and went down to the 1st floor. The new room was at the very end of a dim hallway, past a door marked Mantenimiento and next to a glowing red exit sign. The moment we stepped inside, I noticed the smell, musty and stale, like the room hadn't been used in months. It was cool though, almost too cool compared to the other room. There were 2 twin beds instead of the queen we'd paid for. The bathroom had this weird layout where the door was positioned at an angle and the mirror faced directly at the beds. The walls were an off-white color with water stains in the corners of the ceiling. We were all exhausted. Marco set up Diego's portable travel bed between our 2 twin beds, and within minutes, Diego was asleep. Marco decided to sleep with Diego in his bed to make sure he didn't roll off in the night. I took the other twin bed closest to the bathroom. I was so tired I thought I'd fall asleep immediately, but something about the room kept me awake. Maybe it was the unfamiliar sounds of the hotel or the way the exit sign cast this weird red glow under the door. Eventually, I must have dozed off because the next thing I remember was waking up suddenly around 2 in the morning. What woke me was a sound, like something heavy being dragged across the floor behind the headboard of my bed. It was a slow, deliberate scraping noise. At first I thought it was coming from the maintenance closet. Maybe a night janitor was moving equipment. But then it stopped, and I heard a soft thump against the wall directly behind my head. Thump, pause, thump, like someone was hitting the wall with the heel of their hand. Not angry, just persistent. I froze, listening. Marco and Diego were both still asleep, Marco snoring softly. I needed to pee, but I didn't want to get up. The bathroom suddenly seemed too far away, and I didn't like the idea of walking past that angled door in the dark. But my bladder won out, so I carefully slipped out of bed and hurried to the bathroom. The moment my feet hit the floor, the thumping stopped. I did my business as quickly as possible, trying not to look at my reflection in the mirror. When I came out, everything was quiet again. I got back into bed, pulled the covers up to my chin, and tried to convince myself I was just being paranoid. Just as I was starting to relax, the sounds started again, but this time it wasn't just thumping. I heard what sounded like muffled weeping coming from behind the wall, soft, choked sobs that made the hair on my arms stand up. It was a woman's voice, I was sure of it, and she sounded broken. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. "Hello?" I whispered, not wanting to wake Marco and Diego. The sobbing continued, rising and falling like whoever it was couldn't catch their breath. I glanced at the digital clock on the nightstand. 2:37 in the morning. Too late to call the front desk without sounding crazy. I reached for my phone to use as a flashlight, thinking maybe I could look around the room, check if there was a vent or something where the sound might be coming through. That's when I saw it. A shadow at the end of my bed. Not just a dark spot, but a shape. Like someone crouched down, peeking over the foot of the bed. Just for a split second, I saw what looked like the top of a head and two eyes reflecting the red glow from the exit sign outside our door, and then it zipped away. Not walked, not moved, but literally zipped like someone fast-forwarding a video toward the bathroom door. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. I just yanked the sheets over my head like a terrified kid and lay there shaking. The sobbing behind the wall had stopped, but now there was a new sound. A soft scratching, like fingernails on the wall, moving slowly upward. The scratching continued up the wall, then across the ceiling. I could track its progress by sound, this light scraping noise moving directly over my bed now. Something dripped onto the sheet by my face. One drop, then another. I was too scared to look. I don't know how long I stayed like that, curled up under the sheets, barely breathing. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour. Eventually, I gathered whatever courage I had left and slowly lowered the sheet from my face. The exact second, the sheet moved away from my ear. There was a screeching wail directly beside my head, so loud and so close it felt like it was inside my brain. It wasn't human, it was too high-pitched, too raw, like metal being torn apart. I fell out of the bed, literally tumbled onto the floor, scrambling backward until my back hit the wall. "Marco!" I tried to shout, but it came out as a strangled whisper. The scream cut off abruptly. The room was silent again, except for Marco's steady breathing and my own pounding heart. I didn't get back in that bed. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, eyes fixed on the bathroom door until the first light of dawn seeped through the curtains. I didn't see anything else, but I felt watched the entire time, like something was waiting just out of sight. When Diego woke up around 6, I practically leapt to turn on all the lights. Marco finally stirred, looking at me sitting on the floor with concern. "What are you doing down there?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. "Didn't you hear anything last night?" I demanded. "The screaming? The noises?" He rubbed his eyes. "I heard you yell once, but I was so tired, and Diego had finally settled down. I figured you'd tell me if something was wrong." While Marco got Diego ready, I went to the front desk. I asked if there was another room behind ours, maybe where a woman might have been staying. The clerk looked confused. "No, Senora. Behind that room is only the maintenance closet and the exit door to the alley." "Are you sure? I heard someone crying, hitting the wall." He shrugged. "The pipes make noise sometimes." "Old building." "That wasn't pipes. No way." As we were checking out, I noticed a framed black and white photo on the wall behind the desk. It showed the hotel when it was first built, according to the little plaque. I froze when I saw it. The original building was much smaller. The wing where our room was located had been added later, built on top of what looked like an older, smaller structure. We left as quickly as we could. I didn't tell Marco everything that happened, just that I'd heard strange noises and got spooked. He teased me about watching too many horror movies, and I let him believe that was it. But 3 years later, I still wake up sometimes hearing that scream in my head. I've researched the hotel online but found nothing about its history or any reports similar to my experience. Next month, we're planning another trip to visit family in Mexico. Marco wants to stay overnight in Tijuana again on our way back to break up the drive. I haven't told him yet, but there's no way in hell I'm staying in another Tijuana hotel. I'd rather drive all night or sleep in our car at a gas station, because whatever was in that room that night is still there. And sometimes I swear I can still feel it watching me, even hundreds of miles away in my own bedroom. Story 4. I've had these episodes my whole life. I never knew what to call them until I was in my 20s and stumbled across a forum where people talked about astral projection. That's when everything clicked. What I experience isn't lucid dreaming. I know what those feel like too. This is completely different. There's always this distinct sensation of literally rising out of my physical body, like I'm made of some lighter-than-air substance that just naturally wants to float upward. Sometimes I just hover above my body for a bit before getting pulled back in. Other times I'm instantly transported somewhere else, like my consciousness just decides to teleport. I've gotten used to it over the years, and honestly, most of the time these episodes are pretty mundane. But what happened last Tuesday has me completely freaked out. I haven't told anyone except you guys because who would believe this? I still don't know what to make of it. I work as a medical technician at a hospital, and I'd just finished a brutal 12-hour overnight shift. I got home around 8 in the morning, ate some cereal, and decided to take a nap. Nothing unusual about my routine. I closed the blackout curtains in my bedroom, set an alarm for 2 in the afternoon, and collapsed into bed. I remember feeling that heavy exhaustion in my limbs as I drifted off. I was right on the edge of sleep when I felt it start, that familiar vibration throughout my body, followed by the sensation of rising. It's hard to describe the feeling to someone who's never experienced it. It's like your body turns into static, and then something inside you, your consciousness, I guess, starts to separate from the physical shell. I've learned not to fight it because that just leads to that awful sleep paralysis, where you're trapped between states. So I let it happen, expecting the usual floating above my bed for a few minutes before dropping back down. But this time was different. As soon as I separated, I felt this powerful pulling sensation, like some invisible force had grabbed me and was yanking me away from my apartment. Suddenly I was moving rapidly down what looked like a rural road. It was nighttime in this place, even though it was morning in the real world. The road was lined with tall pine trees, their silhouettes black against a deep blue sky. I could see stars overhead, and there was a sliver of moon providing just enough light to make out the road surface beneath me. I was being pulled along at what felt like 40 or 50 miles per hour, unable to control my movement. The weird thing was that I felt completely lucid. This wasn't a dream. I was aware that my physical body was back in my bed, and I knew I was having one of my episodes, but this one felt more intense, more real somehow. I could feel the cool night air against whatever form I was in, could smell the pine trees and damp earth. After what seemed like maybe 5 minutes of this forced journey, I mentally said, I want control of this experience. I didn't speak out loud. You don't have vocal cords in this state, but I projected the thought forcefully. Immediately, the pulling sensation stopped. It was like whatever was transporting me heard my request and responded. I felt myself being gently lowered until my feet, or what felt like feet in this state, touched the ground. I stood on the road, now able to look around freely. The place was completely deserted. No cars, no houses visible through the trees, just this empty road stretching in both directions. I decided to walk forward, curious about where I was and why I'd been brought here. The sensation of walking in this state is strange. You move more by intention than by actual physical effort. I think I only made it about 20 yards when everything changed again. Without warning, I felt myself being rapidly pulled backward, like someone had attached a bungee cord to my non-physical form and snapped me back. The forest road disappeared in a blur, and suddenly I was back in my bedroom, but not fully back in my body. This is where things get really disturbing. I was in this in-between state, where I could see my physical body lying in my bed, but I was still separated from it, floating a few feet above, and I wasn't alone in the room. Standing beside my bed was a man, a completely bald white guy, maybe in his 40s, wearing blue hospital scrubs, the same color as the ones at the hospital where I work. He was just standing there, looking down at my physical body with this intense concentration. His posture was rigid, his hands at his sides, and he was completely still. My first thought was that I was having sleep paralysis, which I've experienced before. But in sleep paralysis, you're trapped in your body, unable to move. This was different. I was out of my body and could move my consciousness freely. I wasn't paralyzed at all. The man hadn't noticed my astral form yet. He just kept staring at my physical body, and there was something so invasive and wrong about it that I felt a surge of protective anger. I moved my consciousness right up to his face and shouted, or did whatever passes for shouting in that state, "Who the fuck are you? Get out of my room!" His reaction was immediate and bizarre. His head snapped up, eyes widening as he registered my presence. He raised his hands in a surrender gesture, palms facing me, and began backing away toward my bedroom door. The strangest part was that he kept making these small bowing movements, like he was showing deference or apologizing without words. As he backed away, I noticed something that sent a chill through whatever form I was in. The space where the top half of his body had been, where his head and shoulders had blocked my view of the wall behind him, remained dark for a split second too long, like a black shadow lingering in the air before dispersing. It was as if part of him wasn't fully material. He continued backing out through my bedroom door. I didn't follow him because I suddenly became aware of my physical body again and felt that familiar panic that always hits me during these episodes, the fear that if I stay separated too long, I might not be able to get back. I chose to float around my room a bit more, looking down at my physical form still lying in bed. My body was breathing normally, but my face looked unusually pale. There was no sign of the man in blue scrubs. After a final look around, I directed my consciousness back toward my body and felt that familiar sensation of merging, like sinking into a pool of water that perfectly matches your body temperature. There's always this moment of resistance, like trying to push two magnets together on their same poles, but then suddenly you break through and snap back into place. I woke up with a gasp, my heart pounding. My phone said it was 2:30 in the afternoon. I'd been out for about 30 minutes. I immediately jumped up and searched my entire apartment, checking closets, under the bed, behind shower curtains. No one was there. The front door was still locked from the inside with the chain on, and all windows were closed and locked. I've been trying to make sense of this for days now. This wasn't like any astral projection experience I've had before. The forced journey down that night road, the stranger in my room, none of that fits the pattern. What's really bothering me is how normal the guy looked. Sleep paralysis typically gives you shadow figures or demonic-looking entities, the classic night hag experience. But this was just some bald dude in scrubs, like someone I might pass in the hallway at work. Except for that weird shadow thing when he was leaving, he appeared completely solid and real. The fact that he could see my astral form and reacted to it suggests this wasn't just a hallucination, and the way he backed away when confronted, those submissive bowing gestures, it was like he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't. I keep wondering if he was some kind of astral traveler like me, or something else entirely. Was he observing me specifically, or was I just randomly vulnerable because I was between worlds? The scrubs make me wonder if there's some connection to my work at the hospital, but I don't recognize him from there. I haven't had another episode since then, which is unusual for me. Normally I have these experiences 2 or 3 times a month. It's like my body is refusing to let go again, like some survival instinct has kicked in. I've been sleeping with the lights on, which makes me feel ridiculous, but I can't shake the feeling that when I project, I'm not just exploring, I'm being watched, that someone or something knows when I leave my body and can find me in that vulnerable state. I don't know if I'll ever understand what happened. All I know is that something was standing over my unconscious body, watching me while I was helpless, and that realization has changed how I feel about these experiences forever. What was he looking for? What did he want? And most importantly, will he come back? Story 5. It was early March, and the days were still really short in Iceland. The sun had set around 6, and by the time we all got to Christine's house, it was pitch black outside. There were 8 of us all together: me, Christine, her boyfriend Gunnar, my best friend Aki, and 4 other friends from school. Christine had just moved back into her family's old house after her grandmother passed away, and she wanted to have a small gathering to make the place feel more alive. The house itself was nothing special from the outside. A typical Icelandic home built sometime in the 70s. painted white with a dark roof, but inside, it felt different. Not in an obvious way at first, but there was this heaviness to the air that I noticed as soon as I stepped through the door. I remember thinking it was just the smell of an old house that had been closed up for a while, but now I know better. We were all hanging out in the kitchen, drinking Coke and eating pizza, talking about normal teenage stuff, school drama, who was dating who, complaining about teachers. Around 9:30, I got a text from my mom asking when I'd be home. I wanted some privacy to respond, so I told everyone I'd be right back and walked into the living room. The living room was dimly lit by a single floor lamp in the corner. The furniture was old but well kept, clearly from Christine's grandmother's time. There was this massive wooden cabinet against one wall with little glass figurines displayed inside. I sat down on the sofa, which faced away from the doorway, and started typing my reply to Mom. That's when it happened. At first, it was just this slight coolness on the back of my neck, like someone had opened a window somewhere, but there weren't any windows open. I would have heard them in the near silence of the room. The only sounds were the muffled voices and laughter from the kitchen and the soft tapping of my fingers on my phone screen. Then I felt it, a breath, an actual breath on my neck, followed by a raspy, elderly woman's voice whispering hello directly into my right ear. My entire body went rigid. The voice was so clear, so close, that I could feel the warmth of the breath with each syllable. It wasn't threatening. It actually sounded almost gentle, like a grandmother greeting her grandchild. But the fact that I was alone in the room made my heart stop. I froze for maybe 2 seconds before jumping up and spinning around, fully expecting to see someone standing there. But there was nothing. Just the empty living room with its outdated wallpaper and the shadows cast by that single lamp. I searched the entire room with my eyes, looking for anything that could explain what I'd just experienced. Maybe one of my friends had snuck in to scare me. But the doorway to the kitchen was empty, and I would have seen or heard someone leaving. There was nowhere in that room for anyone to hide. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely put my phone back in my pocket. I practically ran, back to the kitchen where everyone else was still chatting and laughing. "Are you okay?" Aki asked as soon as he saw my face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I tried to laugh it off, but my voice came out shaky. "Did one of you just come into the living room?" Everyone shook their heads, looking confused. "I swear someone just whispered in my ear," I said, trying to sound casual but failing completely. Like, right into my ear. I felt their breath and everything. Most of my friends laughed, thinking I was trying to scare them, but Christine's face changed. She put down her drink and exchanged a look with Gunnar. "What did they say?" she asked quietly. "Just hello," I replied, but it was like an old woman's voice, really close to my ear. Christine nodded slowly. "My grandmother died in this house last year," she said matter-of-factly. "But she's not the only one. 4 people have died here total. My grandmother and 3 men who killed themselves. One in the 70s, one in the 90s, and one about 15 years ago." The kitchen went silent. Even the skeptics in our group seemed uncomfortable with this information. "But it's fine," Christine continued, trying to lighten the mood. "My family's lived with them for decades. They don't..." She never finished that sentence. As she was speaking, I felt something tug sharply on the hood of my sweatshirt from behind. Not a gentle pull, a deliberate, strong yank that jerked my head backward. I spun around, but again there was nobody there. This time, though, I wasn't the only one who noticed. Aki's eyes went wide. "Your hoodie," he started, pointing at me. I saw it too," Gunnar interrupted. "It pulled back like someone grabbed it." Panic washed over me. I tore my hoodie off, practically ripping it in the process, and threw it on the floor. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. My hands were ice cold, and I felt this crawling sensation all over my skin, like thousands of tiny insects were moving across my body. Before anyone could say anything else, we all heard it. Heavy footsteps, like someone wearing work boots, pounding up the stairs just outside the kitchen. They were loud, unmistakable. and definitely not from any of us since we were all standing there frozen in shock. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, followed by the distinct sound of a door slamming shut. "What the actual fuck?" whispered Aki, voicing what we were all thinking. Christine looked pale but not as terrified as the rest of us. "That happens sometimes," she said quietly, "usually at night." "We need to check," Gunnar said, trying to sound brave despite the tremor in his voice. "Maybe someone broke in." Part of me wanted to run straight out the front door, but I was too scared to be alone, so I stuck with the group as we cautiously moved toward the stairs. Gunnar grabbed a kitchen knife and Aki picked up a heavy flashlight. I was still in shock, my body moving on autopilot. We searched the entire upstairs, 3 bedrooms and a bathroom, every closet, under every bed. There was absolutely no one there, and all the windows were locked from the inside. The sound had been so real, so physical, the unmistakable weight of a person walking and a door being forcefully closed. But there was no explanation, no rational cause we could find. When we came back downstairs, Christine made us all tea to calm our nerves. My hands were still shaking so badly I could barely hold the mug. That's when she told us more. "My grandmother used to talk about the old woman. I think it's her mother who died here before I was born," she explained. "She said sometimes she'd wake up around 1 or 2 in the morning and see an elderly woman standing in her doorway. The woman would come in, whisper to her to go to sleep, then close the door and turn off the light." "And you still wanted to live here?" I asked, incredulous. Christine shrugged. "They've never hurt anyone. They're more like protective, I guess. My grandmother always said they watched over the house." "What about the men?" someone asked. "The ones who—" "I don't know much about them," Christine admitted. "One hung himself in the attic. Another used pills in what's now my bedroom. The third, I'm not sure. My parents don't like talking about it." We stayed huddled in the kitchen for another hour, nobody willing to be alone. When it was time to leave, I practically sprinted to Aki's car. I couldn't get away from that house fast enough. For weeks afterward, I had trouble sleeping. Every time I'd start to drift off, I'd jerk awake, convinced I'd heard someone whisper "hello" in my ear. I'd feel phantom tugs on my clothes when there was nothing there. The rational part of my brain tried to explain it away. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe someone was playing a prank. Maybe we all just freaked ourselves out. But deep down, I knew what I experienced was real. I talked to Aki about it almost daily. He'd seen my hoodie move with his own eyes. There was no wind in that kitchen, no strings, no explanation. And those footsteps, we'd all heard them, so heavy and deliberate, like someone wanting to make their presence known. What bothers me most, even now, is that I still can't explain it. I was a complete skeptic before that night. I thought ghost stories were just that. Stories. But what happened in that house wasn't a story. It was real, and it changed how I see the world. I went back to Christine's house only once after that night for a school project we had to finish together. The whole time I was there, I felt like someone was watching me, not in a threatening way, but definitely present. Christine noticed me looking over my shoulder constantly and just smiled. "You get used to it," she told me. "My grandmother always said they're just people without bodies trying to make sure we know they're still here. I don't know if I could ever get used to it like Christine has. Sometimes I wonder about those spirits, especially the old woman. Was she just trying to say hello, to acknowledge me? And those men who ended their lives in that house, are they trapped there somehow, replaying their final moments?" 4 years later, I still don't have answers. But I know what I experienced. I know what I felt and heard. And no matter how many times I try to convince myself there's a logical explanation, I can't shake the memory of that raspy hello whispered directly into my ear when I was completely alone in that room. Story 6. I've been debating for weeks whether to share this. It still feels raw, even though it's been over a decade now. I'm not someone who believes in the paranormal, or at least I wasn't. I'm sharing this because I need to put it somewhere, and maybe someone out there has experienced something similar. We moved to Schwartz Creek back in 2004, our little family of 6 squeezed into that white 2-story with the peeling paint on Oak Street. Dad, Ronald, Mom, Charlotte, me, Chelsea, my sister Shira, and my brothers Ronnie and Dylan. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. Dad worked at the auto plant. Mom stayed home with us kids. Normal Midwest family stuff. Everything changed in 2007 when Dad started looking yellow. Like, actually yellow. I remember him standing in the kitchen one morning and the sunlight hit his face, and I just knew something was wrong. Mom kept telling him to see a doctor, but he kept putting it off. Typical Dad, always thinking he was invincible. When he finally went, the diagnosis hit us like a truck: aggressive pancreatic liver cancer. Stage 4. The doctors gave him maybe a year. I was 19 then, living away from home in Washington State, trying to start my own life. I remember sitting on my apartment floor when Mom called, feeling like the world had stopped spinning. But that wasn't even the end of it. Just weeks after Dad's diagnosis, my sister Shira, just 11 at the time, started having these weird symptoms: swollen lymph nodes, night sweats, weight loss. Mom took her to the hospital, thinking it might be mono or something. It wasn't. It was Hodgkin's lymphoma. Cancer. Again. In our family. What are the odds? I flew home as often as I could afford to. Watching both Dad and Shira going through chemo at the same time was, I don't have words. Dad would try to joke about their matching bald heads. Shira would laugh, but you could see the fear in her eyes. She was just a kid. The weird thing about Dad was, even as he got sicker and sicker, he kept holding on. The doctors were shocked he lasted as long as he did. One night when I was sitting with him in the hospital, he grabbed my hand. His grip was still so strong, and said, "I promised Shira I wouldn't die while she was sick. I'm gonna keep that promise." And he did. Shira went into remission in early 2009. Dad passed away just 6 weeks later, on March 27th. It was like he'd been waiting for permission to let go. I went back to Washington after the funeral, had to get back to work, back to my life. Shira seemed to be doing well. The doctors were optimistic. Mom was struggling but holding it together for the kids. I thought maybe we'd weathered the worst of it. Then, about 6 months after Dad died, I got the call that changed everything. It was a Friday night in September. I was getting ready to go out with friends when my phone rang. It was Shira, which was unusual. She normally texted. When I answered, she was breathless, her voice shaking. "Chelsea, are you there?" she whispered. "Yeah, I'm here. What's wrong?" I could tell immediately something was off. "I'm home alone and..." She paused and I could hear her breathing heavily. "I just saw Dad." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean you saw Dad?" "In the kitchen. He was standing by the sink with his head down. He was crying, Chelsea. I saw him as clear as I'm seeing this phone right now." I tried to calm her down, told her it was probably just her mind playing tricks. Grief does weird things to people, but she was adamant. "No, Chelsea, it was him. He looked up at me and then he was gone. I'm scared. I think something bad is going to happen." I stayed on the phone with her until Mom got home. I didn't think much more about it at the time. Chalked it up to her missing Dad, maybe being overtired. I had no idea how prophetic that moment would turn out to be. 2 weeks later, Mom called. Shira had collapsed at school. They rushed her to the hospital. The cancer was back, and this time it had spread everywhere. Her lungs, her liver, her bones. It was aggressive, much worse than before. I booked the first flight I could get to Michigan, but it was scheduled for the following day. Shira declined rapidly. By the time I was packing my bag to head to the airport, she was in the ICU with a breathing tube. I felt so helpless, so far away. I remember throwing clothes in my suitcase, not even caring what I packed, just needing to get to her. That night, I must have fallen asleep waiting for my early morning flight. I dreamed of Dad. It was so vivid, so real. We were sitting in our old living room, but it was bathed in this warm, golden light. Dad looked healthy again. No yellow skin, no sunken cheeks, and he wasn't alone. His cousin Jennifer was there too. Jennifer had died from a heroin overdose just 2 months before Dad passed. Another blow our family hadn't really processed. In the dream, Dad took my hand and said, "Shira's with us now, Chelsea. She's not in pain anymore." I woke up disoriented, tears streaming down my face. My phone was ringing. It was Ronnie. "Chelsea." His voice was hollow. "Shira's gone. She died 10 minutes ago. September 20th, 2009. She was only 13. I later found out from Ronnie that in her final hours, despite being so weak she could barely move, Shira had managed to type a message on her phone to show him. It said, "Heaven is real. God is real." Then she pointed to the corner of the hospital room and typed, "Dad and Grandpa are waiting for me." The doctors said it was probably the medication, the lack of oxygen to her brain, but Ronnie said there was a clarity in her eyes in that moment that hadn't been there for days. I didn't tell anyone about my dream. How could I? It seemed too weird, too coincidental, but I couldn't shake the feeling that somehow Dad had come to tell me about Shira before anyone else could. The next few months were a blur of grief. Mom seemed to age 10 years in a matter of weeks. Ronnie threw himself into work. Dylan, the youngest, became quiet and withdrawn. I stayed in Michigan through the holidays, unable to face going back to my empty apartment. Then came January 10th, 2010, a date that's burned into my memory. It was a Sunday. Mom had taken Dylan sledding at the park. Ronnie was at his girlfriend's. My other sister and I were home alone, both of us sleeping in late after staying up watching movies. The house was quiet, too quiet looking back. I don't know what time it was when I heard it. A voice, clear as day, right next to my ear. "Chelsea, wake up!" I shot up in bed, heart pounding. The room was filled with smoke, thick, choking smoke. I couldn't see more than a foot in front of me. My first thought was my sister. She was in the next room. I rolled out of bed onto my hands and knees, remembering what they teach you in school about staying low in a fire. The floor was hot beneath my palms. I crawled to my door, reached up to touch the doorknob. It wasn't hot, thank God, and pulled it open. The hallway was worse. Black smoke billowed like storm clouds. I could hear crackling from downstairs, the hungry sound of flames devouring our home. I crawled to my sister's room, pushed open the door. She was still asleep somehow, even with the smoke. "Wake up!" I screamed, shaking her. Her eyes flew open, immediately filling with panic. "We have to get out, now!" We crawled together toward the stairs, but the smoke was so thick I could barely see her right next to me. My eyes burned. My lungs felt like they were being scraped raw with every breath. I remember thinking, this is it. We're not going to make it. That's when I heard it again, the voice. "The back window. Go now." I grabbed my sister's arm and changed direction, pulling her toward the back of the house where there was a window that opened onto the roof of the porch. I don't know how we found it in that smoke. I don't know how we had the strength to push it open. But suddenly we were out on the roof, the January air shocking our smoke-filled lungs. Neighbors had already called 911. We could hear sirens in the distance. Someone had dragged their ladder over and we climbed down, collapsing on the snow-covered lawn as our childhood home burned. At the hospital, the doctor told us we had severe smoke inhalation. "Another 30 seconds in that house," he said, looking at our charts, "and you wouldn't have made it out alive." Here's the thing, no one else was in that house. No one could have called my name. No one could have told me to go to the back window. I've replayed it in my head 1,000 times, wondering if I imagined it. If it was just some survival instinct kicking in. But I know what I heard, and sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I wonder if Dad is still keeping his promises, not just to Shira, but to all of us, watching over us, waiting. I don't know if I believe in ghosts or angels or whatever you want to call it. I just know what happened to my family, and I know that voice saved my life. Story 7. I never believed in guardian angels or anything like that growing up. Sure, I had heard stories from my mom, but I was always more interested in practical things, even as a kid. That changed when I was 7 years old, and something happened that I still can't explain to this day. I grew up in a small town in Germany, about 20 minutes outside of Munich. My grandparents lived just a few streets away from us, and I spent a lot of time at their house after school. They had this dog named Billy, a beautiful golden retriever with the gentlest eyes you could imagine. From the moment I was born, Billy appointed himself as my personal protector. My grandparents always told me how he would sleep under my crib whenever I stayed over, and as I grew older, he followed me everywhere. Billy was special. He wasn't just a pet, he was family. Whenever I was upset, he somehow knew and would come rest his head on my lap. If I was playing in the garden, he would patrol the perimeter like he was on duty. One time, when I was about 5, I nearly fell into my grandparents' pond, and Billy grabbed the back of my shirt with his teeth and pulled me back. That's just how he was, always watching, always protecting. When I was 6, Billy got sick. The vet said it was kidney failure, and there wasn't much they could do. I didn't fully understand what was happening, but I remember the heaviness in my grandparents' house, the whispered conversations, and my mom's sad eyes when she explained that Billy might have to go away soon. He deteriorated quickly, and within 3 months, he was gone. It was my first real experience with death, and it hit me harder than anyone expected. For weeks afterward, I would still call out for him when I visited my grandparents. Life went on, as it always does. By the time I was 7, I had joined the local handball team. I loved it. The team spirit, the games, the feeling of accomplishment when we won. Our practice sessions were at a community center about 15 minutes from our house, and since it was in a safe neighborhood with minimal traffic, my mum had started letting me walk there by myself. It made me feel grown up and independent. On this particular day, I remember it was a Tuesday in October. The weather was perfect, not too cold, not too warm, with a gentle breeze that rustled the autumn leaves. I was excited about practice because our coach had promised to teach us a new technique. I had my sports bag slung over my shoulder and was wearing my favorite blue jacket. The route to practice was straightforward. Turn right out of our house, walk 3 blocks, cross the main street at the pedestrian crossing, continue for another 2 blocks, and I'd be there. I'd done it dozens of times before without any problems. When I reached the main street, I did exactly what my mom had drilled into me. Stop, look left, look right, look left again. The crossing had no traffic lights, but it was a straight road with good visibility in both directions. I could see clearly for at least 200 meters each way, and there were no cars coming, absolutely none. I stepped onto the road confidently, already thinking about handball practice, when something made me turn my head to the right again. A black car had appeared literally out of nowhere, speeding toward me much faster than the 30 kilometers per hour limit. In that moment, time seemed to slow down in the strangest way. I could see the driver looking down, probably at a phone, completely unaware of my presence. The car was maybe 10 meters away and closing fast. I froze. My feet felt like they were cemented to the asphalt. My brain was screaming at me to move, but my body wouldn't respond. I remember thinking with absolute clarity, "This is how I die." And then it happened. I felt 2 strong arms wrap around my stomach from behind. The grip was firm but not painful. At the same time, I felt something, maybe a hand, maybe something else, tug at my right leg. The combined force yanked me backward, and I stumbled back onto the sidewalk, my sports bag falling off my shoulder and spilling its contents. The car zoomed past, missing me by centimeters. I felt the rush of air as it passed, heard the engine roaring. The driver never slowed down, probably never even saw me. And then it was gone, continuing down the road as if nothing had happened. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My legs were shaking. Tears sprang to my eyes, not from sadness, but from the pure shock of what had just happened. I had almost died. I would have died if not for... I spun around to thank whoever had pulled me back, but there was no one there. The street, which was usually at least somewhat busy at that time of day, was completely empty. Not a single person in sight in either direction. No one coming out of houses, No one walking by, no one rushing up to check if I was okay. Just silence and emptiness. I stood there, confused and scared, for what felt like forever but was probably only a minute or two. Then I started gathering my things with trembling hands. There was no way I could go to handball practice after that. I just wanted to go home, to see my mom, to be somewhere safe. The walk home felt a million times longer than usual. I kept looking over my shoulder, not out of fear exactly, but searching for something, someone. When I got home, my mom was surprised to see me. One look at my face told her something was wrong. "Emma, what happened? Why aren't you at practice?" she asked, kneeling down to my level. The words came tumbling out of me, my voice shaky and breaking. I told her about crossing the street, about the car appearing from nowhere, about the arms pulling me back, and about turning around to find no one there. When I finished, I expected her to be confused or to tell me I was making things up. Instead, she hugged me tightly and said something I'll never forget. "Emma, I think you met your guardian angel today." She explained that sometimes when we're in danger, our guardian angels, spirits of loved ones who watch over us, can intervene to keep us safe. She suggested it might have been my great-grandfather, her grandfather, who had died before I was born. According to family stories, he had been a kind and protective man who adored children. I wasn't sure what to believe. It seemed too fantastical, too much like the fairy tales I was starting to outgrow. But I couldn't explain what had happened any other way. Someone, or something, had pulled me back from that road, and whoever or whatever it was had vanished instantly. That night, I had the most vivid dream. I was standing in a meadow filled with wildflowers. The sun was warm on my face, and the air smelled sweet. Standing a few meters away was an elderly man I didn't recognize. He had thick, bushy eyebrows and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He didn't speak, just looked at me with an expression of such love that it made my chest ache. And beside him, sitting proudly with his golden coat gleaming in the sunlight, was Billy. He looked healthy and strong, not like the sick, thin dog of his final days. When I saw him, I called out his name and ran toward him. He bounded to meet me, and I buried my face in his fur, breathing in his familiar scent. When I looked up again, the old man was still smiling, and I somehow knew everything would be okay. I woke up feeling peaceful in a way I hadn't since Billy died. I told my mom about the dream, describing the old man in detail. She seemed thoughtful but didn't say much. Life went back to normal after that. I started walking to handball practice again, though I was much more cautious at that crossing. Sometimes when I stood at that spot, I'd feel a strange sense of being watched over, but in a comforting way. I never told my friends about what happened. I knew they'd either be scared or they wouldn't believe me. Years passed. I grew up, graduated school, started university. The incident remained vivid in my memory, but I didn't dwell on it. It was just something unexplainable that had happened once. Then, when I was 19, I was helping my mom clean out some old boxes in my grandparents' attic. They had both passed away by then, and we were preparing to sell their house. Inside one dusty box, we found a collection of old photographs. One photo in particular caught my eye. It showed a man standing in a garden, probably in the 1950s based on his clothes. He was smiling at the camera, his eyes crinkling at the corners, his thick, bushy eyebrows prominent on his weathered face. My blood ran cold. I recognized him instantly. It was the man from my dream all those years ago. Every detail exactly as I remembered. "Who is this?" I asked my mom, my voice barely above a whisper. She glanced at the photo and replied, "That's my grandfather, your great-grandfather. Remember I told you about him? He died before you were born." I had never seen a photo of him before that moment, never. Yet I had dreamed of him exactly as he looked in real life. In that moment, I knew without a doubt what had happened that day when I was 7. My great-grandfather and Billy had saved my life. Somehow, from whatever place they were in, they had reached across and pulled me back from death. I still don't know how it's possible. I can't explain it scientifically or logically, All I know is what I felt, those arms around me, that tug on my leg. All I know is that I should have died that day, but I didn't. Sometimes when I'm walking alone, especially at dusk when the light is fading, I swear I can feel Billy walking beside me, his familiar presence a comfort in the gathering darkness. And sometimes, just sometimes, I catch a glimpse in my peripheral vision of an elderly man with bushy eyebrows watching over me with kind eyes. I don't know if they're still with me, my two guardian angels, but I hope they are, and I hope they know how grateful I am for the gift they gave me, the gift of time, of life, of all the years I've lived since that October day when I was 7 years old. Story 8. I really don't know where to start with this. I've never shared this with anyone except my ex-husband and my therapist, and neither of them really believed me, but I need to get this out there. Maybe someone else has experienced something similar. Maybe I'm not crazy. It started when I was 6. I had this nightmare that I still remember vividly to this day. In the dream, I was standing on my street at night, and there was this thing. It wasn't a person or an animal. It was like a tear in reality, a humanoid figure about 8 feet tall, but it wasn't made of shadow or darkness. It was just nothing. A complete absence of anything, like someone had cut out a person-shaped hole in the universe. It stood under a street lamp which should have illuminated it, but the light just disappeared into it, and the noise it made, God, that roaring sound. Not like an animal roar, but like static and wind and 1,000 voices all at once. In the dream, my family was there with me. My parents, my little brother, my grandma. They formed a circle around me, protecting me, but one by one, they disappeared, just blinked out of existence until I was alone with this void creature. That's when I always woke up, heart pounding, sheets soaked with sweat. After that dream, weird things started happening when I stayed at my grandma's house. I'd be lying in bed, and suddenly I'd feel like I was floating above myself. I could see my own body on the bed below me. It was terrifying, but also fascinating in a strange way. Then I'd feel this pulling sensation toward the front door, like something was trying to draw me outside. Something wanted me to come out into the dark. I always resisted, and eventually I'd snap back into my body with a jolt that made me gasp. The sleep paralysis started around the same time. At first it was just the typical stuff. Waking up unable to move, feeling a weight on my chest, panicking because I couldn't breathe properly. I'd read about sleep paralysis later in life and thought maybe that's all it was, just my brain playing tricks on me. But then the void creature started showing up during these episodes. The first time, it was standing in the far corner of my bedroom, just watching. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. All I could do was lie there, eyes wide open, staring at this impossible thing that shouldn't exist. The second time, it was at the foot of my bed. The third time, it was standing next to my dresser. Each time, it got closer. I tried everything to make it stop. Night lights, sleeping with my door open, even sleeping pills when I got older. Nothing worked. The episodes would come and go, sometimes with months between them, sometimes happening several nights in a row. When I was 21, living in my first apartment, I had what I thought was the final encounter. I hadn't had an episode in almost a year, and I thought maybe I'd outgrown them or something. I was wrong. I woke up in the middle of the night feeling unbearably hot. My whole body was drenched in sweat, and I felt like I was burning up from the inside. That's when I saw it. The void creature was standing right next to my bed, looming over me, looking down. But this time it had changed. There was a single bright red eye in the center of where its face should have been. Not a human eye, more like a glowing red orb that pulsed with its own light. The entire room was bathed in this deep red glow, like everything was covered in blood. And the sound, that horrible static noise, was back, but now it seemed like it was trying to communicate. The static rose and fell in patterns, vibrating through my body like it was trying to speak directly into my cells. I should have been terrified, but the strangest thing happened. I felt calm, almost peaceful. I just closed my eyes and went back to sleep. The next day, I didn't remember any of it until around noon. I was at work, filing some papers, when the memory hit me like a truck. I dropped everything and ran to the bathroom, where I threw up from sheer terror. The delayed reaction was almost worse than the experience itself. It was like my brain had protected me in the moment, but couldn't hold back the horror forever. After that night, the visits stopped. For years, I thought it was over. I got married at 28 to a guy I'd been dating for a couple years. Things were good at first, but the relationship gradually became toxic. He was controlling, made me doubt myself constantly, isolated me from friends and family. But I stayed because I thought that's what marriage was, working through the hard stuff. Then, when I was 30, it happened again. My husband was working an overnight shift at the hospital, so I was alone in our house. I woke up around 3 in the morning because my fan had stopped running. The silence was what woke me. I always sleep with white noise. As I became more alert, I heard something, a quiet growling sound coming from under my bed. My first thought was that a stray animal had somehow gotten into the house, but deep down, I knew it wasn't that. The sound wasn't natural. It had that same quality of wrongness that the void creature's roar had. I decided to check if the power had gone out, which would explain why my fan wasn't working. I got out of bed, careful not to let my feet dangle near the floor for too long, and walked to my bedroom door. The moment I opened it, that deafening roar hit me like a physical force. The same roar from my childhood nightmare. Everything turned red. That same deep, blood-red glow from my apartment 9 years earlier. I tried to run. I slammed the door shut and turned around, planning to go out through the window, but I was back in my bed, like I'd never gotten up at all. I tried again. Got up, went to the door, opened it. Raw, red light, back in bed, over and over, like I was caught in some hellish loop. On my 5th or 6th attempt, I made it past the bedroom door. The hallway was distorted, stretched out like in a funhouse mirror. The walls were pulsing with that red light, and the roaring was so loud I could feel it in my teeth. I ran down the hall to the front door, desperate to get outside, to get away. I reached for the doorknob and felt something behind me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I knew what I would see. The front door wouldn't open. I kept twisting the knob, pulling, pushing, but it was like it was painted onto the wall. Not real. And then I felt it. Sharp claws dragging down the back of my neck, from my hairline to between my shoulder blades. The pain was excruciating, like being cut open with a hot knife. I woke up for real then, gasping and covered in cold sweat. My husband came home an hour later and found me sitting in the kitchen with all the lights on, clutching a knife. When I told him what happened, he said I was just having nightmares because I was stressed about our marriage problems. He didn't even look at my neck when I said I'd been scratched. But there were marks, 3 long red welts that stung for days afterward. I took photos because I knew no one would believe me otherwise. They faded after about a week, but I still have the pictures. I divorced my husband 4 years ago. It wasn't just because of his reaction that night. Our marriage had been broken for a long time, but that was the moment I realized I needed to trust myself, my experiences, my reality, even when others didn't believe me. I'm 34 now. I live alone, except for my 2 cats who seem to sense when something's wrong. They sleep beside me every night, and I haven't had an episode since the divorce. I think maybe the void being preys on vulnerability. When I was a child, when I was in a toxic relationship, those were times when I was weakest, when my sense of self was most fragile. I've done a lot of healing since then. Therapy, meditation, rebuilding connections with friends and family, creating a life that feels safe and solid. But I still sleep with a nightlight. I still can't stand complete silence. And sometimes, when I'm driving at night and pass under a street lamp, I check the shadows around me just to make sure there aren't any human-shaped holes in reality watching me pass by. I don't know what the void being is. A demon, an interdimensional entity, a manifestation of my own fears. Maybe it's just a particularly vivid form of sleep paralysis combined with an overactive imagination. But those scratches were real. The fear was real, and sometimes late at night when I'm almost asleep, I swear I can hear that static-filled roar in the distance calling me, waiting for me to become vulnerable again so it can take another piece of my essence. I know how this sounds. I know most people reading this will think I'm making it up or that I need psychiatric help. Maybe they're right, but I know what I experienced. And I can't shake the feeling that the void being is still out there, still waiting, and that someday it will come back for me. Story 9. I've been hesitating to write this down for years. Even now, my hands are shaking a bit as I type. But after what happened to Damien last week, I feel like I need to document everything. Maybe someone here has experienced something similar or can make sense of it all. I don't know what to believe anymore. This all started back in 1986. I was 13, hanging out with my buddies at our usual spot, this small playground at the bottom of a hill in our suburb. Nothing special, just a couple of swings, a slide, and some benches where we'd waste our afternoons talking about nothing important. Above the playground was this walking path that used to be railroad tracks back in the day. From the playground you could see anyone walking up there clearly, like silhouettes against the sky. That evening in August, it was getting dark, probably around 8 or so. My friends were all facing the playground, but I was sitting on a bench looking up toward the hill. That's when I saw it. There was this figure walking along the path. Even now, thinking about it makes my stomach turn. It was abnormally tall, like impossibly tall for a normal person, maybe 7 feet, and completely pitch black. Not like someone wearing dark clothes, but like a hole cut out of reality. The only features I could make out were the silhouette of a fedora hat, a long trench coat that went almost to its feet, and what looked like a briefcase in its hand. The weirdest part? It was running but making absolutely no sound. Not footsteps, not breathing, nothing, just this silent gliding motion that was too smooth to be human. I remember thinking, what the hell is that? But I couldn't even speak. Then it passed behind this skinny tree on the path, the kind that's barely wider than a person, and it just disappeared completely. The tree was so thin it shouldn't have hidden anything, especially something that tall. If it had continued walking in either direction, I would have seen it immediately after it passed the tree, but there was nothing. I sat there frozen for maybe 30 seconds before I bolted up the hill to check. My friends were calling after me, asking what I was doing, but I couldn't explain. I just had to see. When I got to the tree, there was nobody there. Nothing. No footprints, no disturbed leaves, nothing that suggested anyone had been there at all. I looked in both directions along the path, completely empty. That's when I felt this cold dread wash over me. Whatever I saw couldn't have just vanished like that. It wasn't physically possible. I ran back down to my friends, probably white as a sheet, and tried to explain what I'd seen. They just laughed it off, said I was seeing things, that it was getting dark and my eyes were playing tricks on me. I wanted to believe them, but I knew what I saw. I didn't sleep well for weeks after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see that featureless black silhouette. I started avoiding the playground, making excuses not to go there. Eventually, I kind of pushed it to the back of my mind, tried to convince myself it was nothing. Fast forward to summer of 1987. I hadn't told anyone else about what happened, not even Damien, my best friend. We were hanging out in his basement, playing board games and talking about school starting soon. Somehow we got on the topic of weird things we'd seen, and I decided to finally tell someone who might actually listen. As I described the shadow man, the fedora, the height, the way it moved, I noticed Damien's face change. The color drained from it, and he looked like he might throw up. Then he interrupted me mid-sentence and said, "And a trench coat." I felt my blood run cold. "How did you know that?" Damien told me his story then. 3 months earlier, he'd been walking home after hanging out at a friend's house. It was around 9 at night, and he was taking a shortcut through this wooded path near our neighborhood. Suddenly, these stray dogs started barking and running toward him. He crouched down to pick up a rock to scare them off. When he stood back up, the dogs were gone. But standing not 10 feet in front of him was the same figure I'd seen. Impossibly tall, completely black except for what Damien described as glowing red pinpricks where eyes should be. Fedora hat, trench coat, briefcase, just standing there completely still, watching him. Damien said he'd never felt terror like that before. He turned and ran all the way home without looking back once, convinced the thing was right behind him the whole time. When he got home, he slammed and locked the door, then spent the night with all the lights on. We sat in silence for a while after he told me that. 2 separate encounters with the same impossible thing. That's when the reality of it hit me. This wasn't just in my head. Whatever this thing was, it was real. That's when Damien dropped another bombshell. He'd told his mom about it, thinking she'd dismiss it like my friends had dismissed me. Instead, she got really quiet and asked him to describe exactly what he saw. Then she told him that his aunt had seen almost the exact same thing about 20 years earlier, around 1967. His aunt had been picking mushrooms in the woods outside town. It was broad daylight, middle of the afternoon. She looked up and saw the same figure. Tall, black, fedora, trench coat. The only difference was that instead of a briefcase, it was holding what she described as an old-style telephone, the kind with a rotary dial. She'd screamed, and it disappeared between 2 trees, just like how mine had vanished behind that skinny tree. That's 3 encounters with the same entity across 20 years. After Damien told me that, I went home and asked my grandmother if she'd ever heard of anything like this. I'll never forget the look on her face, like she'd seen a ghost. She sat me down and told me that in our culture, my dad's side is from the Middle East. They believe in entities called jinn. Not like the wish-granting genies in movies, but spiritual beings that exist alongside humans but in a different dimension. She said my great-grandmother had seen something exactly like what I described when she was a young woman back in the old country. It had appeared in her house one night, standing in the corner of her bedroom, watching her. After that night, she burned incense and recited prayers every evening until she died. Damien and I spent the next few weeks researching everything we could about shadow people, Hatman sightings, jinn, all that stuff. We found way more accounts than we expected from all over the world. People describing the same entity, tall, black, fedora, trench coat. Some said it was a demon, others a time traveler, others an interdimensional being. Nobody seemed to know for sure. We both got really into religion after that, started going to church, praying, wearing crosses, anything for protection. We avoided being out after dark, didn't go near the woods or that playground. For a while, it seemed to work. No more sightings until last winter. I started having these recurring nightmares. In them, the shadow man would be standing at the foot of my bed. No movement, no sound, just watching. Then it would raise its hand, and suddenly I'd be on fire. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break my ribs. These dreams happened 2 or 3 times a week for months. Then, just last week, Damien called me at 3 in the morning, completely hysterical. He'd gotten up to use the bathroom and happened to glance out his bedroom window. There, standing at the corner of his house, was the shadow man. But this time, Damien said it wasn't wearing a fedora or trench coat. It had on what looked like a white doctor's coat, stark against its pitch-black body, and it appeared to be sneaking around the corner of the house toward his window. Damien said he'd never moved so fast in his life. He ran to his parents' room and woke them up, but by the time they checked, there was nothing there. No footprints in the snow, no evidence anyone had been there at all. That was 5 days ago. We've both been staying indoors as much as possible since then. Lights on, doors locked, sleeping in shifts. I've got religious symbols from 6 different faiths hanging in my room now. Damien's been staying at my place the last couple nights because he's too scared to be at home. The thing is, we still don't know what this entity wants. Why us? Why our families? Is it just observing, or does it have some purpose? The fact that it seems to be changing its appearance, from having a briefcase to an old telephone to now a doctor's coat, makes it even more terrifying. It's like it's evolving, adapting to the times. I'm writing this all down because I'm scared of what might happen next. If something happens to me or Damien, at least there's a record of what we experienced. Maybe someone else has seen this thing too. Maybe someone knows how to make it stop. All I know is that the Shadow Man is real. It's been haunting my family for generations, and now it seems to be getting closer, more direct, more aggressive. The doctor's coat especially freaks me out, like it's planning to do something to us. If you've seen something like this, please let me know. I'm desperate for answers, and if you haven't, count yourself lucky, and maybe check that skinny tree behind you, just to be sure. Story 10. I still get goosebumps thinking about this. My fiancée Amber and I had been living in our Cedar Springs apartment for about 2 years when the weird stuff started happening. We'd been happy there at first. It was our first place together. Nothing fancy, but it was ours, you know. I remember exactly when things began to shift. Amber was about 3 months pregnant, and we were so excited about becoming parents. That's when little things started happening that we couldn't explain. At first, it was just sounds, like something falling in the kitchen or a door closing when we were both in the living room. We'd look at each other like, "Did you hear that?" and then check it out, but never found anything. We blamed it on our cat, Milo, even though half the time he was snoozing right next to us when we heard the sounds. Milo was this gray tabby I'd had for 5 years. He was always super chill, the kind of cat who just wants to be wherever you are, always purring, always happy. I'd gotten him as a kitten when I was still living with roommates, and he'd always been the perfect pet. Never scratched furniture, never acted out, just a good boy. But as Amber got further along in her pregnancy, Milo started changing. The first really weird thing I noticed was how he'd suddenly bolt through our hallway like a bat out of hell, his fur all puffed out. He'd run from our bedroom to the living room like something was chasing him. This wasn't normal zoomies. This was genuine fear. His eyes would be huge, and he'd hide under the couch for hours afterward. What made it creepier was that he always avoided certain spots in our apartment. He'd take these crazy detours to avoid the corner near our bathroom and another spot near the kitchen entrance. At first, we thought maybe there was a smell or something bothering him, but then we started seeing things in those exact same spots. It started with just glimpses out of the corner of my eye, a dark shape, like someone walking past. But when I turned to look, nothing would be there. I didn't tell Amber at first because I didn't want to freak her out with the pregnancy and all. But one morning over breakfast, she looked really tired, and when I asked her if she was okay, she said, "I know this sounds crazy, but I keep seeing someone standing in the hallway at night." My blood ran cold. I asked her where exactly, and she described the same corner Milo had been avoiding for weeks. That's when we realized we were both seeing the same things. Shadow figures that would appear for just a second before disappearing. Not full-on apparitions or anything that dramatic. Just dark, person-shaped shadows that had no business being there when we were the only ones home. We tried to rationalize it. Old building, weird lighting, pregnancy hormones making us both on edge. We even joked about it sometimes to make ourselves feel better. "Oh, the shadow dude is back," we'd say, like it was no big deal, like it was normal to have unexplained presences in your home. But what we couldn't explain away was what happened to us, to our relationship. Amber and I had always been solid. We rarely fought, and when we did, we worked through it. But around the 6-month mark of her pregnancy, something changed between us. We started fighting. Not just occasional disagreements, but vicious, cruel arguments that would come out of nowhere. I'd say something completely innocent, and she'd explode like I'd insulted her mother, or I'd find myself getting irrationally angry about something tiny, like her leaving a cabinet door open. The worst part was how it felt while it was happening. It was like watching myself from the outside, saying horrible things I didn't mean, feeling this bizarre hatred toward the person I loved most in the world. I'd go to bed wondering who I even was anymore. Amber told me later she felt the same way, like something was hijacking her emotions, making her say and feel things that weren't her. When our son Ethan was born, we had a brief honeymoon period where things seemed better. We were sleep-deprived but happy, focused on our beautiful baby boy. For about 2 weeks, the shadow figures stopped, and even Milo seemed to calm down. Then it all came back worse than before. Milo's behavior became absolutely bizarre. He'd stare at empty corners for hours, his tail twitching, ears flat against his head. He started peeing outside his litter box, something he'd never done before. He'd scratch at closed doors in the middle of the night, howling like he was in pain. But the scariest part was how he started acting around Ethan. Milo had always been gentle around other people's kids, but with our son he became downright menacing. He'd crouch near the bassinet, staring at Ethan with these dilated eyes. Once I found him standing on his back legs, front paws on the edge of the crib, just watching him. When I shooed him away, he hissed at me, something he'd never done in the 5 years I'd had him. The fighting between Amber and me got even worse after Ethan was born. We'd scream at each other over nothing while the baby cried. One night, after a particularly bad fight where I actually found myself contemplating leaving, something I'd never even considered before, I sat alone in the nursery with Ethan, trying to calm down. I was doing little bicycle kicks with his legs, something the pediatrician showed us to help with his gas. I was saying in that stupid baby voice, "Run, run, run, kick, kick, kick." And then I heard it, a voice right behind me repeating, "Run, run, run." It wasn't Amber. It wasn't the TV. It was a raspy, weird whisper, like someone trying to imitate me but not quite getting it right. I froze, Ethan's little legs still in my hands. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I just scooped up my son and walked very quickly to our bedroom where Amber was. I didn't tell her what happened. I was afraid she'd think I was losing it. But that night, as we lay in bed with Ethan between us, Milo started howling in the hallway, this awful, unnatural sound that went on for hours. We couldn't calm him down. He'd run from one end of the apartment to the other, stopping to stare at nothing, then run again. The next morning, I found scratches on the nursery door, deep gouges that hadn't been there the day before. That was the breaking point for me. I loved that cat, but something was seriously wrong, and I wasn't going to risk my son's safety. I told Amber I thought we needed to find Milo a new home. To my surprise, she immediately agreed. It was like she'd been thinking the same thing but was afraid to say it. We both felt guilty. Who gives away a pet they've had for years? But something told us this was necessary. My coworker Brad had been looking for a cat, and he lived alone in a house out in the country. Perfect situation. I arranged to take Milo over that weekend. I remember how frantic Milo was as I put him in the carrier, scratching me so badly my arm was bleeding. He never used to fight going into his carrier. The drive to Brad's place was tense. Milo yowled the entire way. Not his normal meows, but these deep, angry sounds I'd never heard him make before. When we got there, he refused to come out of the carrier at first. Brad was cool about it, said he'd probably just need time to adjust. I left Milo's food, his favorite toys, his bed, everything familiar to help him settle in. As I was saying goodbye, Milo finally came out of the carrier and looked right at me. I swear to God, the look in his eyes wasn't my cat. It was something else looking at me through his eyes. Cold, calculating. I practically ran to my car. The change in our apartment was immediate. I'm not exaggerating or making this up. The moment I walked back in after dropping off Milo, the air felt lighter, like someone had opened all the windows after a year of stuffiness. Amber noticed it too. She was sitting on the couch feeding Ethan, and she looked up at me with this expression of pure relief and said, "It feels different in here, doesn't it?" That night, we slept better than we had in months. No sounds in the hallway, no shadows in the corners, no fighting. We woke up the next morning and had coffee together like normal people. We laughed at something stupid on TV. We played with our son without tension or anger. Days passed, then weeks. The shadow figures never came back. The unexplained noises stopped completely. But most importantly, that horrible feeling between us, that irrational anger and resentment, it was just gone, vanished, like it had never been there at all. Brad texted me a few times about Milo, said he was acting weird at first, but was starting to settle in. I never went to visit. I couldn't bring myself to see him again, which makes me feel like a terrible person, but something in me just knew it wasn't a good idea. It's been about 8 months now since we rehomed Milo. Our apartment still feels normal. Amber and I are back to our old selves. Better even. Ethan is thriving, meeting all his milestones early. I've spent a lot of time trying to make sense of what happened. The only explanation I can come up with is that something, some negative energy or entity or whatever you want to call it, was either attached to Milo or using him somehow. Maybe it followed him to his new home, or maybe it was specifically tied to the combination of him being in our apartment. I've never been a superstitious person, and I've never believed in ghosts or demons or anything like that, but I can't deny what happened in our home, how it affected us, and how completely everything changed the moment Milo left. Sometimes I feel guilty, like we abandoned him when something beyond his control was happening. But then I remember that look in his eyes when I left him at Brad's. That wasn't my cat anymore. And I remember how close Amber and I came to destroying what we had, how we both became people we didn't recognize. I don't have any concrete answers. All I know is that the day our cat left, everything changed, and I'm still trying to understand why. Story 11. I've never told anyone outside my immediate family about this. Even now, 20 years later, I'm sweating just typing this out. But I need to share what happened to me growing up in Henderson, Nevada, because sometimes I still wake up thinking I can smell that rotting meat smell, and I need to know if anyone else has experienced something similar. My family moved into this house on what used to be an old Air Force base when I was 8. The neighborhood looked normal enough. Cookie-cutter homes built in the 90s, desert landscaping, nothing that screamed haunted. But from the first night, things were off. It started with little things. Objects would move when no one was looking. I'd put my backpack on my desk and find it on my bed later. The TV would turn on by itself at 3 in the morning, always to static. My parents chalked it up to my imagination or forgetfulness, but I knew better. Then came the shadow people. I'd see them darting around corners, lingering at the end of hallways, standing in doorways, just black silhouettes shaped like people, but with no features. My little sister saw them too, which was the only reason I didn't think I was losing my mind. But the worst part of the house was the main bathroom. God, that bathroom. It connected to a small hallway that branched off from the main corridor, creating this little dead-end space that always felt wrong. Even after I grew up and could logically understand there was nothing to be afraid of, I would still run through that hallway at night. Something about it just felt malevolent, like something was waiting there. I was 11 when I first encountered what I now call the thing with no skin. It was a Tuesday night in October, and I was taking a shower before bed. The bathroom would always get super foggy because the ventilation was crap, and I was just standing under the hot water, zoning out like kids do. Then I heard it. 3 distinct knocks coming from the medicine cabinet above the sink. Not the kind of knocks that pipes make when they're settling. These were deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. Like someone was trying to get my attention. I froze, water still running down my face. "Hello?" I called out, feeling stupid immediately. No one answered. Just as I was about to go back to washing my hair, I heard the knocks again. Knock, knock, knock. "Mom," I called louder this time. "Dad?" Nothing. I pulled back the shower curtain just enough to peek out. The bathroom mirror was completely fogged up from the steam, except for one spot. A small area had been wiped clear, like someone had run their finger through the condensation. And in that cleared space, I could see an eye, a black slanted eye with no eyelid, no surrounding skin, just this glossy black orb peering in at me. I screamed and yanked the curtain closed, backing up against the shower wall. The shampoo bottle clattered to the floor, and I stood there, paralyzed for what felt like forever, the water turning cold against my skin. When I finally worked up the courage to look again, the mirror was completely fogged up. No wiped area, no eye. My parents came running, of course, but there was nothing to show them. They thought I'd seen a shadow from the hallway light or had water in my eyes. But I knew what I'd seen. For the next few weeks, I refused to shower alone. My mom would sit on the toilet lid reading a magazine while I bathed as quickly as humanly possible. But eventually she got tired of it, told me I was too old to need supervision, and I was on my own again. I managed to avoid another encounter for almost a year. I developed all these little rituals, never looking at the mirror while showering, always keeping the bathroom door wide open, taking lightning-fast showers and running out of there still half soapy. But one night, when I was 12, I saw it again. I was walking down that small hallway to my bedroom when I felt this intense cold spot. In Nevada in July, when it's 105 degrees outside, the air conditioner was good, but not that good. I stopped walking, and that's when I smelled it. This overwhelming stench of rotting meat, like roadkill that's been baking in the desert sun for days, and then it stepped out of the bathroom. I can't even describe it properly, but I'll try. It was shaped like a person, but wrong. Too tall, too thin, with joints that bent at unnatural angles. Its skin, God, it didn't have any. It was just raw, glistening muscle and sinew and exposed tendons, like someone had peeled every inch of skin off a human body. Those black eyes were set directly into the raw flesh of its face. No eyelids, no eyebrows, nothing. Its fingers ended in these long black claws that clicked against each other when it moved. But the worst part was its mouth, just a slash in the meat of its face, sewn shut with what looked like black fishing line, the stitches pulling and stretching as it smiled at me. I couldn't move. I literally could not make my body respond. I just stood there staring at this thing while it stared back at me. It tilted its head like a curious dog, and I swear I could hear the wet squelch of muscle and tendon as it moved. Then it took a step toward me, and the spell broke. I ran. I ran faster than I've ever run in my life, straight to my bedroom, slammed the door, and dragged my desk in front of it. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. I could hear it outside my door. Not footsteps exactly, but this wet, slapping sound like raw meat being thrown against a cutting board. And then the knocking started. Knock, knock, knock. Just like in the bathroom. The same deliberate pattern. It knocked for hours. My parents' bedroom was on the other side of the house, and either they couldn't hear it or, I don't know, maybe they couldn't hear it at all. Maybe it was only knocking for me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my bed with my baseball bat, staring at the door until sunrise. When morning came, the knocking stopped, and I finally worked up the courage to move the desk and look outside. There was nothing there. No footprints, no evidence, nothing but that lingering smell of decay that faded as the day went on. I tried to tell my parents, but they were going through a rough patch in their marriage, and they wrote it off as a nightmare or an overactive imagination. My dad even took me to a child psychologist who suggested I was manifesting anxiety about their fighting as fear of monsters, so I stopped talking about it, but it didn't stop appearing. The worst encounter happened when I was 14. I was home alone. My parents were at a marriage counseling session, and my sister was at a friend's house. I'd been avoiding showers when no one was home, but I had a date the next day, my first ever, and I was paranoid about smelling bad, so I decided to risk a quick shower. I turned on every light in the bathroom, left the door wide open, and even brought my dad's portable radio in to fill the silence with noise. I felt ridiculous but determined. Everything was fine until about halfway through my shower. The bathroom lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. The radio kept playing, so I knew it wasn't a power outage, just the lights. I stood there in the pitch-black shower, soap still in my hair, absolutely terrified to move. The water suddenly felt ice-cold against my skin. I reached for my towel hanging over the curtain rod, pulled it down, and wrapped it around my face, like somehow not seeing would protect me. That's when I felt it, breathing on the back of my neck and shoulders, slow, ragged breaths that smelled like meat left too long in the sun. Something brushed against my back. Not a hand, more like the tip of a claw, tracing a line down my spine. The lights came back on as suddenly as they'd gone out. I pulled the towel from my face, and the first thing I saw was the mirror. It should have been completely fogged up from the steam, but it was perfectly clear, and in the reflection standing right behind me was the skinless thing. It was smiling, as much as something with a sewn-shut mouth can smile, the black stitches stretched and strained against whatever it was using for lips. One of its clawed hands was raised, hovering just inches from my neck. I bolted. I didn't even grab a towel. I ran naked and soaking wet straight to my room, leaving puddles all the way down the hall. As I slammed my bedroom door, I heard it, this deep, high-pitched laughter. I know that doesn't make sense, but that's the only way I can describe it, and the bathroom door slowly creaking shut. I lived in that house for 4 more years before I left for college. The thing with no skin appeared a few more times, always in or near that bathroom, always when I was alone. I developed protective measures. I stopped using that bathroom entirely, using only the half bath downstairs. I hung crosses and dream catchers everywhere. Desperate times, desperate measures. I kept lights on constantly. My parents divorced when I was 16, and my mom, sister, and I stayed in the house. My mom never saw anything, but my sister had her own encounters, though she refuses to talk about them to this day. When I left for college, I thought I was free of it, and mostly I have been. But sometimes, when I'm in the shower, I'll catch a whiff of that rotting meat smell, or I'll wake up at night to the sound of knocking, knock, 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 from inside my closet or bathroom. I don't know what that thing was. I don't know why it chose our house, or me. All I know is that it was real, and sometimes I still feel like it's watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down again. Story 12. I've never been one to believe in ghosts or spirits or whatever you want to call them. Growing up, my mom was always the superstitious one, lighting candles on special days, keeping protective trinkets around the house, while I rolled my eyes at it all. We're from Eastern Europe originally, and those old beliefs followed us when we moved to America 5 years ago. But what's happened in our new house has completely changed how I see things. I don't even know where to start, but I need to tell someone because I'm scared to be in my own home right now. My mum and I moved into this house in Willowbrook suburb on January 1st of this year. It's one of those newly developed areas where everything looks the same, beige houses with small yards all lined up in neat rows. The rent was good, especially for the area, and we were excited to finally have our own place after sharing an apartment with my aunt's family for the past few years. Everything was normal for the first week. We unpacked, arranged furniture, hung pictures. Mom was especially happy because she finally had space for a proper living room with a couch where she could watch her shows after work. I was just glad to have my own bedroom after sharing with my cousin for so long. Then the knocking started. About 10 days after we moved in, Mom mentioned at breakfast that she'd heard someone knocking on the living room door the night before. She sleeps on the pull-out couch sometimes when her back hurts, and she said around midnight she heard 2 distinct knocks on the door that connects the living room to the hallway. She called out thinking it was me, but when no one answered, she got up to check. The door was closed, and when she opened it, the hallway was empty and dark. My bedroom door was shut, and when she peeked in, I was fast asleep. She didn't think much of it. Old houses make noises, right? Except our house isn't old. It was built less than 2 years ago. The next night it happened again. 2 knocks, always in the same pattern. Knock, knock. Then silence. She called out again, got no answer, and checked the house. Nothing. This continued for almost a week. Always when she was lying down in the living room. Always 2 knocks. Always no one there when she checked. Sometimes the knocking would stop for the night after she investigated, but other times it would happen again an hour later. She started to joke that maybe we had a polite ghost who at least knocked before entering. I never heard the knocking myself. I'm a heavy sleeper, and my bedroom is at the end of the hallway. Mom didn't seem too bothered by it either, just confused. She even wondered if it might be something with the heating system or pipes. Then the TV incident happened. Mom works early shifts at the hospital cafeteria, so she leaves the house by 5 in the morning. I don't have classes until 10, so I'm usually still asleep when she goes to work. About 3 weeks after we moved in, I was woken up at 5:30 by my phone buzzing with text messages. It was our neighbor, Mrs. Patel, asking if we could please turn down our TV because it was very loud and her baby had just fallen asleep. I was confused because I was in bed and Mom was already at work. I texted back saying we weren't watching TV, but she insisted she could hear it through the wall. Our townhouses are connected and the kitchen shares a wall with their nursery. Annoyed and half asleep, I dragged myself out of bed and went to the kitchen. Sure enough, the small TV we keep on the counter was on, volume turned almost all the way up, playing some morning news program. I have no idea how it turned on. It's an old TV with manual buttons, not a smart TV that could glitch. I turned it off, texted Mrs. Patel that I was sorry, and went back to bed. When I told Mom about it later, she looked worried. She said she hadn't touched the TV that morning and had made her coffee in the dark as usual to avoid waking me. We checked if the TV had a timer setting that might have turned it on, but it didn't. We even unplugged it for a few days, but nothing strange happened, so eventually we plugged it back in. For the next few weeks, things were relatively normal. The knocking continued occasionally, but Mom had gotten used to it. She'd just call out, "Good night to you too," when it happened, and somehow that made it less scary. We joked about our roommate who never paid rent, but at least was polite enough to knock. I know this all sounds like I'm not taking it seriously, but that's how we dealt with it. Neither of us wanted to admit we were living in a haunted house, so we made jokes instead. It was easier that way, until last night. I still can't believe what happened. Mom told me this morning, and her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her coffee cup. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. She had fallen asleep on the couch watching TV around midnight. She woke up suddenly around 2 in the morning. She checked the time on her phone. The TV was off and the house was completely silent. No knocking this time. Instead, she had the feeling someone was watching her. When she looked toward the living room doorway, she saw me, or what she thought was me. She said I was standing half hidden behind the doorframe, just peeking around it, watching her. Only my face and part of my shoulder were visible. She called out to me, asking if everything was okay, but I didn't answer. I just kept staring at her. After calling out a second time with no response, she got annoyed and said, "You're scaring me, Natalia. What's wrong?" That's when the figure, the thing that looked like me, stepped fully into the doorway. Mom said it was wearing exactly what I had worn to bed, my gray sweatshirt and black pajama pants. It had my face, my hair, everything. It just stood there, not speaking, not moving. Mom sat up on the couch, getting more confused and scared by the second. As she looked more closely at the figure, something started happening to it. She said it began to fade, like it was made of smoke that was slowly dispersing into the air. It didn't walk away or move. It just started becoming transparent until it disappeared completely. Completely terrified, Mom ran down the hallway to my bedroom and threw open the door. I was there, sound asleep in my bed, wearing the exact same clothes the apparition had been wearing. She shook me awake, hysterical, asking if I had just been in the living room. I was groggy and confused, told her I'd been asleep the whole time. I hadn't gotten up even once. Mom didn't go back to the living room. She climbed into my bed and stayed there until morning, not sleeping, just staring at the doorway. I could feel her trembling next to me all night. This morning, as soon as the sun came up, she went around the house burning incense in every room, opening windows and whispering prayers in our native language. She called in sick to work for the first time in years. She's been on the phone with my aunt all day, talking in hushed tones. I'm writing this from the local coffee shop because I can't stand to be in that house right now. The knocking was one thing. The TV was weird but explainable. But this? Something that looked exactly like me. I don't know what to make of it. Mom thinks it's a doppelganger, an evil spirit that takes your form. In our culture, seeing your own doppelganger or having someone see it is considered an omen of death. I've been trying to convince myself there must be some logical explanation. Maybe Mom was half asleep and dreaming. Maybe it was a shadow or reflection that her tired mind transformed into something familiar. But deep down, I know better. 3 separate phenomena in less than 3 months, each one more disturbing than the last. This can't be coincidence anymore. I've been researching the history of Willowbrook development online, trying to find out if anyone died on this property before they built these houses. So far, I haven't found anything, but the development company's website is suspiciously vague about the land's previous use. It just says the area was undeveloped before construction began in 2021. Mom wants us to move out immediately. She's already called our old landlord to see if our previous apartment is available. I was resistant at first. Moving is expensive, and we just got settled here. But after hearing about what she saw, I'm ready to pack tonight. I keep thinking about what would have happened if that thing that looked like me had spoken to her. What would it have said? What did it want? Was it trying to replace me somehow? We're spending the night at my aunt's apartment tonight. Tomorrow we're coming back with my uncle and cousin to pack our essential belongings. Mom already gave notice to the property management. We're breaking our lease, losing our security deposit, and I don't even care. I'm writing this partly as a warning to whoever might move in after us. The house on 38 Willow Lane looks normal. It's new, clean, with no history that we know of. But something is in there with you. Something that knocks politely before it enters. Something that can look exactly like the people you love. It's been watching us for 3 months, learning our habits, our faces, our clothing, and last night it finally showed itself. I don't know what would have happened if Mom hadn't woken up when she did. I don't want to know. We're moving out next week. I just hope whatever it is doesn't follow us. Story 13. I can't believe I'm finally putting this into words. I've told bits and pieces to a few close friends, but I've never shared the full experience until now. It's been 3 years and I still wake up sometimes with that feeling that something fundamental was taken from me that night in Blackwater Forest. It was supposed to be a simple winter camping trip. My buddy Mike and I had been planning it for months. We're both experienced outdoorsmen and wanted to test our skills in the Canadian boreal forest during early winter. Not the dead of winter, mind you, just early December when there's snow, but temperatures aren't deadly yet. We'd done similar trips before, just never in this particular area. We drove up from Toronto on a Friday morning, arriving at the trailhead around noon. The forecast predicted clear skies, temperatures around 25 degrees Fahrenheit, cold but manageable with our gear. We hiked about 4 miles in before setting up camp in a small clearing. Everything felt right that first night. We cooked over our portable stove, shared a flask of whiskey, and turned in early. The next day was spent exploring nearby trails and fishing at a small frozen lake, where we managed to catch a couple of trout through the ice. It was peaceful. Normal. Looking back, I think that's what makes what happened later so much worse. The contrast between that perfectly ordinary day and the nightmare that followed. As evening approached on our second day, we realized we needed more firewood to stay warm through the night. Our supply was running low, and the temperature was dropping faster than the previous evening. "I'll go grab some more," I told Mike. "You stay and get dinner started." He nodded, focused on setting up our cooking gear. "Don't go too far, Jackson. Sun's going down quick today." I grabbed my flashlight knife and a small hatchet. It was around 5 in the evening, but the forest was already growing dark under the thick canopy of pines. I had on my blue winter jacket, not the red one with my emergency whistle in the pocket. That stupid, careless mistake has haunted me ever since. I headed out, sticking to what looked like a game trail that wound through the trees. The snow was only about 4 inches deep, but it muffled every sound, creating that weird winter silence that seems to swallow everything. I gathered pieces as I went, planning to make my way in a wide circle back to camp. About 15 minutes in, I realized I'd gone farther than intended. The light was fading fast, and the landmarks I'd been using, a fallen tree, a distinctive rock formation, suddenly all looked the same in the growing darkness. I wasn't panicking yet, but I felt that first flutter of unease in my stomach. I decided to head back, using my flashlight now that visibility was poor. But after walking for what should have been enough time to reach camp, I found myself in completely unfamiliar territory. The trees seemed denser here. The air felt colder. That's when I realized I was lost. Not hopelessly lost. I knew the general direction of camp, but disoriented enough that yelling for Mike made sense. I called out his name several times, listening hard after each shout. Nothing but that oppressive forest silence. I tried to retrace my steps, following my own footprints in the snow, but in some places they'd already begun to fill with fresh snowfall that had started drifting down. My heart rate picked up. I checked my watch, 6:38. I'd been out way too long. Then I heard it. At first, I thought it might be Mike calling back to me, but it wasn't a human sound. It wasn't quite an animal sound either, at least not any animal I recognized from my years in the Canadian wilderness. It was a wailing that started low and climbed to a pitch that made the hair on my arms stand up under my layers. It wasn't a wolf howl or a cougar scream, those sounds I know. This was wrong somehow, like it was trying to mimic something it had heard but couldn't quite get right. I froze, suddenly very aware of how alone I was. The sound came again, closer this time. My breath clouded in front of my face as I spun around, sweeping my flashlight across the trees. "Mike!" I shouted, no longer caring if I attracted whatever made that sound. Being found by my friend seemed more important than hiding from the unknown. "Mike, I'm over here!" My voice echoed and died. Nothing. I decided to pick a direction and stick with it. Camp was roughly northeast when I left, so I'd head that way and hope for the best. I started walking faster, occasionally calling out for Mike, trying to ignore the way the forest seemed to be watching me. After about 10 minutes of increasingly panicked hiking, I came to a small clearing with a large, flat rock in the center, and that's when I saw it. My flashlight beam caught something perched on top of the rock. At first glance, I thought it was a wolf. We'd seen signs of them in the area, but as the light fully illuminated it, I realized it was too large for a normal wolf or coyote. Its body was lean, almost emaciated, with limbs that seemed too long, too angular. Its face was pointed with a snout that reminded me of a coyote but wasn't quite right. And its eyes, God, those eyes, they were huge, much larger than any canines should be, and they stared directly at me without blinking. But what truly terrified me was that they didn't reflect my flashlight. Every animal's eyes should reflect light in the darkness. It's basic biology. These eyes absorbed the beam like black holes. I shouted at it, waving my arms the way you're supposed to when encountering wildlife. It didn't move, not a muscle, not a twitch. Nothing that lives should be able to remain that still. "Hey!" I yelled again, taking a step forward and then immediately regretting it. The creature didn't react to my movement or my voice. It just watched. I'm not a spiritual person. I don't believe in the supernatural. But in that moment, staring into those eyes, something fundamental in me recognized that I was in the presence of something that should not exist. And then the feeling hit me. It wasn't fear. Not just fear, anyway. It was grief. A crushing, overwhelming sadness that felt like every funeral I'd ever attended, every pet I'd ever lost, every relationship that had ever ended, all compressed into one unbearable moment. I felt tears freeze on my cheeks before I even realized I was crying. Those eyes seemed to be searching inside me, past skin and bone and into whatever makes a person themselves. I had the distinct sensation of being emptied, like something was being extracted through my gaze. Something important, something I wouldn't get back. I don't know how long we stared at each other. It could have been seconds or minutes. Time felt meaningless. What finally broke the spell was a distant shout, Mike calling my name. I tore my eyes away from the creature, turned and ran toward Mike's voice, screaming his name over and over. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Some primal part of me knew that if I did, I might never leave that clearing. By some miracle, I found Mike, or rather, he found me. He'd been searching for almost an hour, worried when I didn't return. I was shaking violently, not just from cold. He assumed I was just frightened from being lost, and I let him believe that. I couldn't explain what had happened. I couldn't find the words. We made it back to camp where Mike built up the fire while I sat wrapped in my sleeping bag, unable to stop trembling. I kept seeing those eyes when I closed mine, so I forced myself to stay awake most of the night. When morning came, I convinced Mike we needed to leave, making up an excuse about the weather turning. Before we packed up, though, I had to know. I retraced my path from the previous evening, finding my way to that clearing with the rock. There were no tracks in the snow except my own from the night before. No sign anything had ever been there. The rock sat empty and ordinary in the morning light. We hiked out that day, and I've never returned to Blackwater Forest. I've never told Mike what I saw. Who would believe me? Sometimes I almost convince myself it was just a stress hallucination from being lost in the cold, but I know better. I know because I'm not the same person who went into those woods. There's a hollow space inside me now, a void where something essential used to be. I feel it most strongly at night, when I lie awake wondering what exactly was taken from me during that silent exchange. I've researched local legends since then. The Algonquin and Cree have stories of forest spirits that can take the form of animals, but aren't bound by their limitations. The Wendigo myths describe creatures that feed on more than just flesh, but nothing quite matches what I experienced. All I know is that something watched me from that rock. Something old, something patient, something that doesn't belong in our understanding of the world, and whatever it did to me can't be undone. I still camp, I still hike, but I never go alone anymore, and I never let myself get caught in the woods after dark, because sometimes when I'm drifting off to sleep, I hear that strange wailing sound again, calling from the depths of my memory, and sometimes I feel an urge to answer it. Story 14. I've been debating whether to share this for months now. I'm not normally one for paranormal stuff. Honestly, I've always been pretty skeptical about ghosts and all that. But what happened to me and my partner Marcus during lockdown in my grandfather's flat in Liverpool has completely changed how I see things. I still get goosebumps thinking about it. For context, when the pandemic hit last year, our landlord decided to sell the house we were renting. With the housing market in chaos and nowhere to go, my grandfather offered us his flat while he stayed with my aunt. He's been living alone since my gran passed 5 years ago, and the place has always felt a bit empty, but nothing weird, just a modest 2-bedroom flat in an older building in Liverpool. The first few days were completely normal. We were just grateful to have somewhere to stay during such a crazy time. Marcus was working from home at the kitchen table, and I was bouncing between job applications after being furloughed from the cafe I managed. My little dog Mimi seemed to settle in fine too. It started with small things about a week after we moved in, random banging noises throughout the flat. Nothing major, just the kind of sounds that make you get up and check if all the doors are properly closed or if something's fallen over. We blamed it on the old pipes or the neighbors at first. The building's from the 70s. So we figured it was just settling. Then one morning, we woke up to find the lounge door closed. Doesn't sound like much, I know, but we always left it open for Mimi to wander in and out during the night. Marcus and I both clearly remembered leaving it open before bed. We looked at each other with this confused expression, but then just shrugged it off. Maybe one of us had gotten up to use the toilet and closed it without remembering. But then it happened again the next night. And the night after that. I've always thought paranormal stuff was supposed to happen at night, you know. That's what all those ghost hunting shows suggest. But what really started to freak us out was when things began happening in broad daylight. I'll never forget this one afternoon about 3 weeks in. It was around 12:30 and I was feeling a bit under the weather, just a cold, not COVID, thankfully. I was lying on the sofa with Mimi curled up beside me and Marcus was sitting in my grandfather's old armchair. We were watching some rubbish daytime TV just to pass the time. Suddenly there was this weird buzzing sensation in my ears. Not painful, just strange. Like when you're on an airplane and your ears need to pop, but different. I noticed Marcus rubbing his ears too. "Can you feel that?" I asked him. He nodded, looking confused. "Yeah. It's weird. Maybe it's the TV. Should I turn it off?" The moment he said that, and I swear on my life this happened, the TV switched itself off. Not the standby mode where the little red light comes on, completely off. But here's the thing, the Freeview box was still on, glowing blue. We just sat there staring at it. Marcus went over to check the TV, pressing the power button, checking the plugs. Everything was connected properly. When he turned it back on, it worked fine. "That was odd," he said, trying to sound casual, but I could tell he was rattled. That same afternoon, Mimi started acting strange. She was staring intently at a spot right beside our bed. Not just a quick glance, but full-on staring. her head moving slightly as if following something. Her ears were perked up, and she was making this low whining sound I'd never heard before. "What is it, girl?" I asked, getting nervous. She ignored me completely, which is unusual for her. Marcus walked into the bedroom and instantly stopped. "Bloody hell, it's freezing in here," he said, rubbing his arms. It wasn't just cold, though. He described it later as a cold tingling throughout his body. The rest of the flat was perfectly warm. That night, when I went to turn on the kitchen light, it flickered for ages before finally coming on. It had never done that before. When I mentioned it to Marcus, he said he'd noticed the same thing the previous evening. The knocking sounds were getting more frequent too. Sometimes they sounded like they were coming from the front door, so one of us would go check, but there was never anyone there. Other times it sounded like someone was tapping on the kitchen counters or the bathroom door. One night around 10, we heard 3 distinct knocks on the wall behind the sofa, the wall that separates our flat from the neighbors. Marcus went next door to ask if they'd been knocking, but they said they'd been watching TV quietly all evening and hadn't heard anything on their side. Mimi's behavior was becoming increasingly concerning. She would suddenly start following something invisible around the room with her eyes, sometimes barking or growling at whatever she thought she saw. She'd never been the type of dog to bark at nothing. There was this one incident that still makes my skin crawl. I was alone in the flat. Marcus had gone to the shop for some essentials. I was in the bedroom folding laundry when I heard the front door open. Then came the familiar sound of keys being dropped in the bowl by the door, followed by footsteps heading to the kitchen. I heard the kettle being filled and switched on. I thought Marcus had returned, so I called out, "Did you get the bread?" No response. I walked to the kitchen, and it was empty. The kettle wasn't on. The front door was still locked from the inside, exactly how Marcus had left it. But I heard someone come in and start making tea. It wasn't imagination or a dream. I was wide awake and completely alert. When Marcus came back 10 minutes later, I was sitting on the sofa, shaking. I told him what happened, and he tried to comfort me, suggesting maybe it was a neighbor's kettle I'd heard through the walls. But we both knew our neighbor on that side was an elderly lady who was staying with her daughter during lockdown. "Maybe it was your grandfather," Marcus suggested hesitantly. "You said he always makes tea when he first comes home." That thought hadn't occurred to me, and it sent a chill down my spine. My grandfather was alive and well at my aunt's house, but his decades-old routine of coming home and making tea was so ingrained that maybe some echo of it remained in the flat. I didn't know whether to find that comforting or terrifying. The incidents kept happening, becoming more physical. One morning we found Mimi's brush on the lounge floor. The brush was kept on the top shelf of the bookcase. There's no way Mimi could have reached it, and neither of us had used it the day before. Marcus was getting really unsettled. He's usually the rational one, always looking for logical explanations, but even he was running out of those. "I don't think we're alone here, Em," he said one night as we lay in bed, both too on edge to sleep. "I keep feeling like I'm being watched." I felt it too, that prickling sensation on the back of my neck when I'd walk down the hallway, the feeling that if I turned around quickly enough, I'd catch something, or someone, standing there. We decided to try something. Marcus had read online about using camera flashes to capture paranormal activity that the naked eye can't see. So one evening, we went around the flat taking photos with the flash on. Most of them showed nothing unusual, but in 3 of the pictures, one in the lounge, one in the hallway, and one in my grandfather's bedroom, there were these strange orbs of light floating around. They weren't dust or reflection from the flash. They were perfectly round, glowing spheres that appeared to be suspended in mid-air. The photo that really got to us was the one in my grandfather's room. There was a distinctly human-shaped shadow beside the wardrobe, but neither of us had been standing there when the photo was taken. The shadow had what looked like shoulders and a head, but no distinguishable features, just a dark silhouette where nobody should have been. After that, things escalated quickly. The TV would change channels on its own. Items would move from where we'd left them. The temperature in certain rooms would drop dramatically for no reason. One night I woke up to find all the kitchen cupboards open, though I definitely closed them before bed. The worst was when Marcus felt something touch him. He was washing up after dinner, and he said it felt like someone placed a hand on his shoulder, firm enough that he turned around expecting to see me standing there. But I was in the bathroom, and he was alone in the kitchen. He dropped the plate he was washing and just stood there, frozen. We were starting to feel unwelcome in the flat, like whatever was there wanted us gone. The atmosphere had changed from merely unsettling to somewhat hostile. The banging got louder, happening at all hours. Mimi refused to go into certain rooms, particularly my grandfather's bedroom. She would stand at the threshold, hackles raised, and no amount of coaxing would get her to enter. I called my grandfather to casually ask if he'd ever experienced anything strange in the flat. He paused for a long time before saying, "Your grandmother used to say she could feel my mother in there sometimes. I never believed her." My grandfather's mother, my great-grandmother, had died 2 years before I was born. I never met her, but according to family stories, she was a bit of a difficult woman in life. Very particular about her home and not especially welcoming to outsiders. Was it her? Was it something else? We couldn't explain it. We started leaving lights on at night. We'd check and double-check the locks. We'd reassure each other that there must be rational explanations for everything. But there wasn't an explanation for what happened last Wednesday. It was around 3 in the afternoon. I was sitting at the kitchen table working on my laptop when I heard Marcus call my name from the lounge. I went in, but he wasn't there. I called out for him, and his voice replied from our bedroom. When I went to the bedroom, it was empty too. I found him in the bathroom, looking confused. "Did you just call me?" I asked. "No," he said. "I thought you were calling me." We both heard each other's voices calling from rooms we weren't in. Someone, or something, was mimicking us. That night, as we lay in bed trying to sleep, the knocking started again. But this time, it wasn't random. It was rhythmic, deliberate. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, pause, over and over, coming from inside the wardrobe in our room. Marcus got up, switched on the light, and approached the wardrobe cautiously. The knocking stopped. He opened the doors slowly. Nothing unusual inside, just our clothes hanging there. He closed it again, turned off the light, and got back into bed. The moment he pulled the covers up, the knocking resumed, but now it was coming from under the bed. We stayed completely still, hardly breathing. The knocking continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then it stopped, and the room went silent. Too silent. Even the usual sounds of traffic outside or neighbors moving around seemed muted, like the room had been enveloped in some sort of bubble. That's when Mimi, who had been curled up at our feet, suddenly leapt up and started barking frantically at the bedroom door. The door that we had closed before getting into bed was now standing wide open, revealing the dark hallway beyond. And there, just for a second, we both saw it. A shadowy figure standing in the doorway. Not solid, but not quite transparent either. Just there enough to see the outline of shoulders and a head, exactly like in the photo. Then it was gone, and Mimi stopped barking immediately, like someone had hit a mute button. She jumped off the bed and trotted into the hallway, wagging her tail as if greeting an old friend. We left the next morning. I told my grandfather we found another place, which wasn't true. We're staying with Marcus's brother until we figure out what to do next. I haven't told my grandfather exactly what happened. I don't want to worry him, especially during these already stressful times. But I keep thinking about that flat, sitting empty again, and I wonder if whatever is there is happy now that we're gone, or if it's waiting for someone new to arrive. I don't have any answers, and I'm not sure I want them. All I know is that I'll never look at an empty room the same way again. Story 15. I don't know if anyone will believe me, but I need to get this off my chest. I've been carrying this experience for years now, and it still makes my skin crawl whenever I think about it. I was in 8th grade, living in this small town called Oak Ridge, where literally nothing ever happens. Well, nothing normal anyway. My home situation wasn't great. My mom was an alcoholic with a nasty temper. I won't go into details, but let's just say I preferred staying at my grandparents' house whenever possible. I was already dealing with depression back then. Doctors later diagnosed me with PTSD, anxiety, and borderline personality disorder too. But at that time, I was just a confused kid who felt like a dark cloud was following me everywhere. I always sensed this negative energy around me. My counselor said it was just my depression making everything seem darker than it was, but after what happened that night, I'm not so sure anymore. My grandparents' house was this old two-story place with creaky floors and drafty windows. I always stayed in the same bedroom, the one I'd used since I was little. It had these faded blue walls with some old baseball posters I'd put up years ago. The bed was against the wall opposite the door, with this metal lamp on the nightstand to the left. I always kept a nightlight plugged in because, well, the room just felt weird in the dark. That particular night, I went to bed around 10, exhausted from trying to avoid my mom earlier in the day. I remember staring at the ceiling for a while, listening to my grandparents moving around downstairs before they finally went to bed. The house got quiet except for the occasional groan of the heating system. I must have fallen asleep eventually because the next thing I knew, I was being violently shaken awake. And I don't mean like someone gently nudging me. It felt like someone had grabbed my shoulders and was trying to rattle my brain loose. My eyes shot open, heart pounding, but no one was there. My first thought was that I'd had one of those falling dreams, you know, where your body jerks right before you hit the ground in your dream. I checked the time. It was just after midnight. I rolled over, trying to calm down, when I heard it. Snapping, like fingers snapping, but not in any kind of rhythm, just random, aggressive snaps. And they weren't coming from one spot. They were all around my bed, like I was surrounded by invisible people snapping their fingers at me. I'd like to say I was terrified, but honestly, when you've grown up with the kind of stuff I had, your fear response gets a little messed up. Instead of screaming or running, I just felt annoyed. "Shut up," I mumbled, pulling my blanket tighter and closing my eyes. I was so used to weird shit happening in my life that I just wanted to sleep. The snapping continued for maybe another minute before stopping. I was drifting off again when the shaking started a second time. This time it was even more violent, and I felt the actual bed moving. Not like an earthquake movement, more like someone was at the foot of my bed, grabbing the frame and shaking it hard. I sat up, fully awake now and genuinely pissed off. "What the hell?" I said to the empty room. Thanks to my nightlight, I could see everything clearly. The room was empty. The door was closed. Nothing had fallen over. But the snapping started again, louder this time, coming from all directions around the bed. It sounded like 20 people were circling me, just standing there, snapping their fingers. I remember swearing under my breath and lying back down, pulling the covers over my head like a little kid. My heart was racing, but I was more angry than scared. I just wanted to sleep. Eventually the snapping stopped again, and I managed to doze off. The third time I woke up was the worst. The shaking didn't stop when I opened my eyes. It kept going so hard that my teeth were chattering. I sat up, fully prepared to scream for my grandparents when the snapping started again. It was different this time, faster, more aggressive, and it sounded closer, like whatever was making the noise was right next to my ear. That's when I saw something, or felt something, I don't know, whiz past the foot of my bed. It moved so fast I couldn't make out what it was, just a dark blur. Then I heard a loud clang as it hit the metal lamp on my nightstand. That was it. I'd had enough. I was a troubled kid with a short fuse, and whatever was happening had pushed me over the edge. "Leave me the fuck alone," I yelled, not even caring if my grandparents heard. "I deal with enough shit already. Get out." I remember throwing my pillow in the direction of the lamp and then yanking my blanket over my head, shaking with rage and fear. I stayed like that for what felt like hours, waiting for something else to happen. But nothing did. The room went completely silent. No snapping, no shaking, nothing. When morning finally came, I felt like I hadn't slept at all. My eyes were burning and I had this massive headache pounding behind my eyes. The first thing I did was check the lamp and the area around it, looking for whatever had hit it. The lamp was exactly where it always was, but I swear it had a small dent that hadn't been there before. I searched the entire room, under the bed, in the corners, behind the dresser. but I never found anything that could have made that noise. My grandma asked me at breakfast if I'd had a nightmare because she heard me yell. I just nodded and didn't explain. How could I? "Oh yeah, Grandma, invisible things were snapping at me and throwing stuff at my lamp." She already worried about my mental health enough. Here's the thing that still freaks me out. I know what hallucinations feel like. I've had them before during really bad depressive episodes. I know what lucid nightmares feel like too. I used to have these recurring ones where I was being tortured, but this was different. Hallucinations don't shake you awake. They don't make your bed move. They don't throw things that make actual noise when they hit metal. I stayed at my grandparents' house plenty of times after that, but nothing that extreme ever happened again. Sometimes I'd hear the faint sound of snapping when I was almost asleep, but as soon as I'd sit up and say, "Don't even start that shit again," it would stop. I've tried researching what might have happened. Poltergeist activity is supposedly more common around troubled teenagers, especially ones with trauma or emotional issues. Some theories suggest that negative energy can manifest physically or attract other negative entities. I don't know if I believe that, but I also don't have a better explanation. My counselor suggested it might have been a particularly vivid episode of sleep paralysis combined with hypnagogic hallucinations, but that doesn't explain the dent in the lamp or why I could move freely the entire time. What scares me the most isn't what happened that night. It's the possibility that whatever it was followed me, because sometimes, even now, when I'm alone in my apartment and the stress of the day has me at my breaking point, I'll hear it just once or twice. Snap, snap. Like a reminder that it's still there, waiting for me to be at my lowest again. I don't tell this story often because it sounds crazy, even to me, but I know what I experienced. Whatever was in that bedroom that night wasn't just in my head, it was real, it was angry, and for some reason, it chose me. And the worst part is, I still don't know why or what it wanted from me. Sometimes I wonder if it's still in that bedroom at my grandparents' house, waiting for another troubled kid to spend the night. Or maybe it's still with me, just waiting for the right moment to start snapping again. Either way, I sleep with music on now, always. Because the silence just reminds me of those moments between the snapping when I knew something was there, watching me, waiting to start again. Story 16. I never believed in ghosts, at least not until I moved into my house in Willowbrook almost 20 years ago. Even now, I'm not entirely sure what to think. All I know is that I've experienced things I can't explain, things that have left me questioning everything I thought I knew about reality. Let me start by saying this. The house I live in is old. Really old, like built in the 1890s kind of old. It's been through a lot in its 130 years. From what the locals told me when I first moved in, it's been a police station, a dentist's office, and home to who knows how many families. The real estate agent never mentioned anything about hauntings or strange occurrences, and none of the old-timers in town had any spooky stories about the place. It was just an old house with good bones and a lot of history. The first weird thing started about a week after I moved in. I woke up in the middle of the night, completely paralyzed. I couldn't move a muscle, couldn't even open my mouth to scream, and I wasn't alone. Standing around my bed were these figures, dark shadows with no distinct features, except they weren't exactly human-shaped. They were more like twisted trees, with limbs that branched out in unnatural ways. I should have been terrified, but weirdly, I wasn't. There was this strange sense of calm, almost like they were watching over me. This happened almost every night for the next 7 years. I'd wake up, see them there, unable to move, but feeling strangely at peace. I told myself it was just sleep paralysis. I'd read about it and it seemed to fit. The mind wakes up before the body, causing hallucinations and the inability to move. Perfectly rational explanation, right? Except sometimes there was another figure among them. This one was different. A completely black silhouette, distinctly human-shaped but with no features at all. Just a void in the shape of a person. And unlike the others, this one scared the hell out of me. Whenever it appeared, that sense of peace vanished, replaced by pure, cold dread. After those first 7 years, the sleep paralysis episodes became less frequent, but other things started happening. I'd be sitting in the living room reading, and I'd hear knocks inside the walls. Not the normal settling sounds an old house makes. These were deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. Like someone was trying to get my attention. I remember one night in particular. It was about 11 o'clock, and I was heading to the bathroom before bed. As I walked down the hallway, I felt this heaviness. Like the air had suddenly become thick with something negative. Not wanting to deal with whatever it was, I hurried into the bathroom and closed the door behind me. That's when I heard it. Knocking. It started at the far end of the hallway, faint at first. Tap, tap, tap. Then it got louder, moving closer to the bathroom door. Tap, tap, tap. When it reached my door, the knocking became so violent that the door shook on its hinges. Bang, bang, bang. It was deafening. I stood there frozen, staring at the door, waiting for it to burst open. But after about 10 seconds of this, the banging continued past my door, heading toward the end of the hallway, getting quieter again until it disappeared completely. I waited in that bathroom for at least an hour before I worked up the courage to open the door. When I finally did, the hallway was empty, silent, like nothing had happened. For years, I'd hear those knocks, sometimes inside, sometimes outside. Sometimes they'd respond when I knocked back. I'd tap 3 times on a wall, and 3 taps would come back from somewhere else in the house. It was unsettling, but after a while, it just became part of living here. The weirdest part is that in the last few weeks, things have changed again. Instead of scaring me, whatever's in this house seems to be helping me. I know how crazy that sounds. Last Tuesday, I was running late for work. I was rushing around the kitchen trying to make coffee and get breakfast together. I turned to grab a mug from the cabinet, and before I could reach for it, the cabinet door swung open on its own. I stood there staring at it for a solid minute. Then I grabbed the mug, said thanks out loud, feeling like a complete idiot, and went about my business. But it kept happening. Cabinet doors opening just before I reached for them. Sometimes before I even knew which one I needed. Like last Thursday, I was making spaghetti and realized I needed a strainer. Before I even turned toward the cabinet where I keep it, I heard the door click open behind me. Now look, I'm not naive. I know old houses make noise, floors creak, pipes knock, wood expands and contracts. But this feels different. It feels intentional, intelligent. There was this one time a couple months back when I couldn't find my car keys anywhere. I was tearing the house apart, already 20 minutes late for an important meeting. I was in the kitchen emptying out drawers when I heard a loud thud from the living room. I went in there and found a book had fallen off the shelf. My keys were sitting right there on the floor next to it. I have no memory of leaving them on that shelf, or the time my alarm didn't go off for an early flight. I was sleeping soundly when I felt something physically shake my shoulder. I woke up with a start, looked at the clock and realized my alarm had failed, but I still had just enough time to make my flight if I hurried. There was nobody in the room with me. I've had friends stay over who've experienced things too. My buddy Mark refused to sleep in the guest room after spending one night there, said he felt someone sit on the edge of the bed multiple times throughout the night. My sister swears she heard someone whisper her name while she was showering, but nothing violent or threatening has ever happened to them or to me. Honestly, if I am sharing my house with ghosts or spirits or whatever you want to call them, they're the most boring ghosts ever. No flying objects, no scary messages written in blood on the walls, no possession, just some knocks, some doors opening, and the occasional helpful nudge. I've thought about bringing in one of those paranormal investigation teams, but what would I even tell them? Hey, can you check out my house? Sometimes the cabinet doors open by themselves, and I think the ghosts are trying to help me find things I've misplaced. They'd laugh me out of town. There was one incident about 3 years ago that still gives me chills, though. I was in the basement doing laundry. It's not a finished basement, just concrete walls, exposed pipes, a washer and dryer, and a bunch of storage boxes. I was loading clothes into the washing machine when the light bulb blew out. Complete darkness. I felt my way to the stairs, but before I could start climbing, I heard something moving in the far corner of the basement. It wasn't the scurrying of a mouse or a raccoon. It was heavier, deliberate, like footsteps. I froze, one foot on the bottom step. Then I heard what sounded like someone dragging something heavy across the concrete floor. I called out, "Hello?" No response, just more dragging sounds. I bolted up those stairs faster than I've ever moved in my life and slammed the door behind me. I didn't go back down there for 3 days. When I finally worked up the courage, everything looked normal, nothing out of place. But there were these marks on the concrete floor, like something heavy had been dragged exactly where I'd heard the noise. The strangest part of all this is that I'm not afraid to live here. Despite everything I've experienced, this house feels safe. Protected even, like whatever is here with me means me no harm. Well, except maybe that human-shaped shadow and whatever was in the basement that one time. Last night was the latest incident. I was doing the dishes, and I dropped a glass. It shattered all over the kitchen floor. I sighed and went to get the broom from the pantry. When I came back, the broken pieces had been pushed into a neat pile in the center of the floor. I hadn't left the kitchen for more than 30 seconds, and I live alone. I stood there staring at that pile of broken glass for a long time. Then I swept it up, said thank you to the empty room, and went to bed. This morning, I woke up to find all the cabinet doors in the kitchen standing wide open, not just one or two, all of them. I checked the entire house, but nothing was missing. Nothing was disturbed, just open cabinets, like someone was trying to show me something or tell me something. I still don't know what to make of all this. Are they ghosts, some kind of energy left behind by the many people who've lived and worked in this house over the last century? Or am I slowly losing my mind? All I know is that I'm not alone here, even when I'm the only person in the house, and whatever's here with me seems content to just exist alongside me, opening cabinets, knocking on walls, watching over me while I sleep. They're the most boring ghosts ever, and honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. Story 17. I've never been one to believe in ghosts or anything supernatural. My parents raised me to be practical and rational, and I've always prided myself on not falling for superstitious nonsense. That's why what happened last week has completely shattered my worldview, and I honestly don't know who to talk to about it. My best friend Zoe and I have been close since middle school. We're both 20 now and in our second year of college. Last Friday, I went over to her house in Briarwood to hang out. Her parents were away for the weekend visiting her aunt, so we had the place to ourselves. We ordered pizza, watched some dumb videos on YouTube, and eventually started watching those ghost hunting shows that are always so obviously fake. We were cracking up at how dramatic they were, you know, with their night vision cameras and those ridiculous ghost detection gadgets. Zoe's the type who finds humor in everything, and she started mimicking the hosts, walking around her bedroom with her phone flashlight, speaking in this overly serious voice. "If there are any spirits present, please give us a sign," she said, trying not to laugh. "Make your presence known." I was sitting cross-legged on her bed, nearly choking on my soda from laughing so hard. Zoe started getting more specific with her requests, which made it even funnier. "If you're here with us, push something off the desk or knock a picture off the wall. Turn the lights off. Touch one of us." She was practically shouting these commands, waving her arms around dramatically. We were both in hysterics at this point. It was so ridiculous. I remember wiping tears from my eyes and saying, "Oh my God, stop, I can't breathe." That's when it happened. Zoe's water bottle, which had been sitting on her desk, suddenly fell off and hit the floor with a loud thud. We both froze for a second, then burst into laughter again. "Nice timing," I said, assuming she'd somehow knocked it over without me noticing. Zoe looked at me with wide eyes. "I didn't touch it," she said, still laughing. "Maybe we actually summoned something." I rolled my eyes. "Yeah, right. It was probably just balanced weird or something." But then her bedside lamp started flickering, not in a subtle way, but aggressively turning on and off. I remember the hairs on my arms standing up, but I still wasn't really scared. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe there was an issue with the electricity in the house, or the bulb was dying. Zoe, though, she was absolutely thrilled. Instead of being freaked out, she got even more excited. "Oh my God, this is amazing," she squealed, jumping up and down. "If you're really here, can you do something else? Can you touch one of us? I give you permission to touch us." That's when I started feeling uncomfortable. "Hey, maybe we shouldn't," I began, but Zoe was too caught up in the moment. "Come on, don't be such a baby," she said. "This is just a coincidence, or maybe my house has faulty wiring, but if there really is a ghost here, I want to know." I wasn't scared exactly, but something felt off. I suggested we watch a movie instead, and thankfully Zoe agreed. We put on some comedy on Netflix, and by the time it was over, I'd pretty much forgotten about the whole ghost hunting thing. It was just us messing around, and those signs were obviously just coincidences. When I left Zoe's house around 11 that night, I didn't think twice about what had happened. I drove home, said goodnight to my mom, who was still up reading, took a shower, and went to bed. It was a normal end to what I thought had been a normal day. I woke up the next morning around 9. As soon as I became conscious, I noticed a dull ache in my right forearm. I figured I must have slept on it wrong or something. I checked my phone, scrolled through social media for a bit, then finally got up to get dressed. I pulled my sleep shirt off and reached for a clean t-shirt when I caught sight of my arm in my bedroom mirror. I froze, staring at my reflection in disbelief. There were 3 long scratches running from my wrist almost to my elbow, red and slightly raised against my skin. Next to them was a cluster of bruises, small round marks that looked like fingerprints. They were a deep purple color, the kind of bruises that don't appear immediately but develop overnight. I touched the scratches carefully. They stung a little, like they were fresh. The bruises were tender too. I tried to remember if I'd hurt myself the day before. Maybe I'd scraped my arm against something at Zoe's house, but I knew I hadn't. I would have noticed something like that. With shaking hands, I took a picture of my arm and sent it to Zoe with the message, "Did I hurt my arm somehow at your place yesterday? Woke up with these marks and have no idea where they came from." She replied almost immediately, "WTF? No, you were fine when you left. Those look nasty. How did you not notice getting those?" "I didn't have them last night," I texted back. "They appeared overnight." There was a long pause before her next message came through. "Maybe you did it in your sleep?" Or, "Remember our ghost game? Maybe our ghost friend followed you home, Loel." She added a ghost emoji, clearly joking, but her words sent a chill through my entire body. My hands started trembling so badly I could barely hold my phone. The scratches on my arm seemed to burn more intensely as I read her text over and over. I'm not proud of my reaction, but I completely freaked out. I called Zoe, barely able to speak coherently as I tried to explain how terrified I suddenly was. She tried to calm me down, saying she was just kidding, that there had to be a rational explanation. "Maybe you scratched yourself in your sleep," she suggested, "or your cat could have done it." "I don't have a cat," I reminded her, my voice barely a whisper. "And look at the bruises, Zoe. They look like fingerprints. Like someone grabbed my arm really hard." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then she said, "Come over, we'll figure this out." I threw on some clothes and drove to her house, checking my rearview mirror obsessively the entire way, though I don't know what I expected to see. When I got there, Zoe examined my arm more closely. "These definitely weren't here yesterday," she confirmed, her voice more serious now. "And they don't look self-inflicted." "What do we do?" I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. Zoe bit her lip. "I think we need to close whatever we opened. If we really did invite something in." I couldn't believe we were having this conversation. 2 rational college students discussing ghosts and spirits like they were real, but the evidence was literally marked on my skin. Something had happened to me while I slept, and the timing, right after our mock ghost hunting session, couldn't be coincidental. We spent the whole day researching online, trying to figure out what to do. Most websites seemed like complete nonsense, but we were desperate. That evening, we went back to Zoe's room where it all started and performed what some website called a closing ritual. We burned sage, which Zoe's mum conveniently had in her spice cabinet, opened all the windows, and firmly stated that any entities we had invited were no longer welcome and must leave. I felt ridiculous doing it, but also desperate. The scratches on my arm had gotten more inflamed throughout the day, and the bruises darker. I was willing to try anything. That night, I was too scared to sleep alone, so I stayed at Zoe's. We left her bedside lamp on and tried to stay awake as long as possible, but eventually exhaustion took over. I must have dozed off around 3 in the morning. I woke up suddenly, the room pitch black. The lamp we'd left on was off. I could hear Zoe breathing softly beside me, still asleep. And then I felt it, pressure on the foot of the bed, like someone sitting there. The weight shifted and I could feel it moving up the mattress towards me. I was completely paralyzed with fear. I wanted to scream, to wake Zoe, but no sound would come out. I could feel cold air against my face, like someone was breathing on me. The scratches on my arm began to burn intensely. Then I heard it, a soft, raspy whisper right next to my ear. "You invited me in." I must have blacked out from fear, because the next thing I remember is Zoe shaking me awake, sunlight streaming through her window. I was drenched in sweat, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. "You were having a nightmare," she said, looking worried. "You kept whimpering in your sleep." I told her what I'd experienced, and she looked skeptical, suggesting it was sleep paralysis brought on by stress. But when I pulled up my sleeve, we both gasped. The scratches had multiplied. There were now 5 distinct lines running down my arm, and the bruises had spread to my upper arm and shoulder. It's been 5 days since then. The scratches are slowly healing, but new ones keep appearing, small ones on my back that I can only see in the mirror. One on my ankle this morning. I've been staying at Zoe's because I'm too terrified to be alone, but I know I can't hide forever. Whatever we invited that night hasn't left. It's attached to me now, and I don't know how to make it go away. I can feel it watching me, even now as I type this. Sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I catch glimpses of a dark figure, but when I turn to look, there's nothing there. I don't expect anyone to believe me. I wouldn't have believed it myself a week ago, but I'm desperate for help. Has anyone experienced anything like this? How do I get rid of something I can't see but can definitely feel? Every night, I hear that same whisper. "You invited me in." And every morning I find new marks on my skin. Story 18. I've been hesitating for months about writing this all down, but I need to get this off my chest. Maybe someone here has dealt with something similar and can offer advice beyond the usual "just move out" comments. Trust me, if it were that simple, I would have been gone years ago. I've lived in my condo at Pinewood Heights for over 5 years now. It's a modest 2-bedroom place in a quiet suburban neighborhood, nothing special from the outside. The mortgage is incredibly affordable compared to anything else in this area, which is honestly the main reason I'm still here, despite everything that's happened. I should mention that I've always been sensitive to spirits. Even as a kid, I could sense things others couldn't. My mom was the same way, so I grew up thinking it was normal to occasionally feel watched or to catch glimpses of shadows moving in peripheral vision. But nothing in my past experiences prepared me for this place. The activity started small during my first month here. At first, I blamed the strange noises on the building settling or neighbors moving around, the occasional missing item, just me being forgetful. But then things escalated quickly. I'll never forget the first major incident. I was in the shower when the bathroom door, which I always keep closed to trap the steam, flew open with such force it bounced against the wall. No windows were open, no drafts, nothing that could explain it. I remember standing there dripping wet, staring at the empty doorway with my heart racing. After that, things became more consistent and impossible to ignore. The dryer door swings open while running, not just occasionally, but almost every single load. I'll close it, start the cycle again, and within minutes, it's wide open. The maintenance guy has checked it 3 different times and says there's absolutely nothing wrong with the mechanism. The kitchen faucet turns on by itself, sometimes in the middle of the night. I'll wake up to the sound of running water and walk into the kitchen to find it going full blast. Utensils I leave on the counter will suddenly fly off as if someone swiped them. One time, a knife landed point down in the wooden floor, sticking straight up like something out of a horror movie. I've tried explaining this to friends, but most think I'm exaggerating until they stay over. Well, stayed is more accurate. None of them ever stay twice. My best friend Jen came for a weekend and left at 2 in the morning after something pulled her hair hard enough to wake her from a dead sleep. She said she felt cold fingers against her scalp. My dad, who's the most skeptical person I know, tried renting my spare room about 3 years ago when he was between apartments. He lasted exactly 4 months and never even unpacked most of his boxes. He wouldn't tell me exactly what happened, just said, "This place isn't right, Morgan," and moved in with my brother instead. I've become convinced there are at least 6 distinct spirits here permanently, plus others that seem to visit occasionally. I know how that sounds, but when you live with them long enough, you start to recognize their signatures, the way they interact with the physical world. There's one that only messes with electronics. My TV will turn on at exactly 3:17 a.m. about twice a week. My phone will suddenly blast music at full volume, even though nothing's playing. My laptop will shut down in the middle of important work. Another one seems confined to the hallway between the bedrooms. The temperature there drops dramatically sometimes, and I often feel something brush against me as I walk through. The kitchen has its own entity that seems particularly active when I'm cooking. Cupboard doors open and close. The refrigerator hums louder, then quieter in patterns that almost sound like speech. But the worst one stays in my bedroom. That's the one that grabs my ankles when I'm trying to sleep. I've gotten used to sleeping with my feet under multiple blankets tucked firmly under the mattress, but I still feel the tugging some nights. I've tried everything to cleanse the place, and I mean everything. I've had the place blessed with holy water by a priest friend who looked genuinely disturbed by the end of the ritual. I've burned sage in every corner while reciting prayers and setting intentions. I've used Palo Santo wood, salt barriers, crystal grids, protective symbols. You name it, I've tried it. Nothing has made any difference. Last year, things got significantly worse when my boyfriend Jake moved in. He was skeptical at first, but became a believer within days. We started hearing a man's voice distinctly saying, "Hello," in the middle of the night. The first time it happened, we both shot up in bed and stared at each other in shock. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, and I just nodded, too terrified to speak. The voice started appearing in our dreams too. Jake would wake up gasping, saying he dreamed of an old man standing at the foot of our bed, just repeating "hello" over and over. I had the same dream a week later. Jake moved out after 3 months. I don't blame him. The breaking point came when something pushed him down the stairs. He swears he felt 2 hands firmly plant against his back as he was heading down to the laundry room. He only fell down 3 steps before catching himself on the railing. But it was enough. I've considered moving so many times, but my financial situation makes it difficult. This mortgage is less than half what I'd pay to rent anywhere nearby, and my job requires me to be in this area. I've been saving up, though, with plans to move out of the country in another 2 years. That's become my light at the end of this very dark tunnel. The worst part is knowing these entities are aware of me, of my fear, my plans, maybe even my thoughts. Sometimes I'll just be sitting on the couch and I'll feel a sudden weight next to me, as if someone sat down. The cushion will actually depress. Once I felt what seemed like fingers stroking my hair while I was reading. I froze completely, afraid to move until the sensation stopped several minutes later. There have been other incidents too, ones I'm not entirely comfortable sharing here. Let's just say some of the encounters have become inappropriate in nature. I've woken up with unexplainable bruises on my inner thighs. I've felt touches in places no one should be touching without consent. It's degrading and terrifying, and it's gotten to the point where I dread going to sleep. Even my neighbors have experienced things when helping me out. Last summer, I went on vacation for a week and asked my next-door neighbor Ellie to feed my cat. She agreed but called me on the third day, frantic. She said while she was scooping the litter box, all the cabinet doors in the bathroom slammed shut simultaneously, and then the shower curtain wrapped around her like someone was pulling it. She refused to go back in and ended up breaking into my patio door to get the cat and take him to her place for the rest of the week. My cat, Milo, seems to see them constantly. He'll track invisible movements across the room with his eyes, sometimes hissing and arching his back at empty corners. Other times, he'll purr and rub against nothing, as if being petted by someone I can't see. It's disturbing to watch. Last month, I hit a new low. I was making dinner when I heard distinct footsteps walking up behind me. I could even hear the specific creak of the floorboard that always announces someone's presence in the kitchen. I turned, expecting to see nothing as usual, but instead saw a dark, human-shaped shadow standing about 5 feet away. It wasn't just a trick of the light. It had dimension and form. We stared at each other for what felt like minutes, but was probably only seconds before it simply melted into the floor. I sat on the kitchen floor crying for an hour afterward. I've started sleeping with the lights on and music playing to drown out any voices or sounds. I've mapped out the safe areas of my condo, places where activity seems less frequent. I spend most of my time in those spots now, which means I essentially pay a mortgage for a full condo, but live in about 30% of the space. The entities seem to feed off fear and attention on days when I can manage to ignore the small stuff, the moving objects, the temperature changes, the whispers. Things stay relatively calm, but if I react, especially with fear, everything amplifies. The night after I screamed at something touching my face while I was falling asleep, every single door in my condo slammed shut simultaneously at 4 a.m. It felt like retaliation. 2 weeks ago, something new happened. I woke up around 2 in the morning to find myself unable to move. Classic sleep paralysis, which I've experienced before. But this was different. As I lay there, I saw my bedroom door slowly open, and a tall figure walked in. It moved jerkily, almost like stop-motion animation, coming closer to my bed with each unnatural step. I tried to scream, but couldn't make a sound. It leaned over me, its face a blur of features that seemed to constantly shift and change, and whispered something I couldn't understand. Then it placed its hand on my chest, and I felt a pressure so intense I thought my ribs would crack. Just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished and I could move again. I spent the rest of the night in my car in the parking lot. I know I need to leave this place. I know it's affecting my mental health, my relationships, my entire life. But 2 more years, that's all I need to save enough to make a clean break. I've started documenting everything, partly to maintain my sanity and partly as evidence. I have dozens of recordings of unexplainable sounds, a few blurry photos of shadow figures, and a journal detailing every incident. Last night was the worst yet. I was washing my face in the bathroom when the mirror fogged up completely, despite the water being cold. As I watched, words appeared in the condensation, never leaving. I backed out of the bathroom and slept at a hotel. I'm writing this from a coffee shop because I can't bring myself to go back home yet, but I will, tonight. Because what choice do I have? I'm trapped there as surely as they are, at least for now. If anyone has experienced anything similar, or has advice beyond what I've already tried, please let me know. I'm desperate, but I'm not giving up. Story 19. I've never shared this story online before, and honestly, I'm not even sure I should be writing about it now. This happened about 7 years ago when I was 15, living in a small countryside village called Hawthorne. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and there's really not much to do except hang out at each other's houses. My best friend Jess and I were having one of our regular weekend sleepovers at her house. Her parents were away for the night at some work function, so it was just us and her older brother Kyle, who was 18 at the time and mostly kept to himself upstairs playing video games. Jess had always been interested in spiritual stuff, crystals, tarot cards, that sort of thing. I was more skeptical, Honestly, kind of afraid of anything that seemed supernatural. I'd always been that kid who couldn't sleep after watching even the mildest scary movie. But Jess was my best friend, and I trusted her judgment. That afternoon, she pulled out this crystal pendulum she'd bought from a New Age shop in the next town over. It was a small, clear quartz crystal attached to a silver chain. She was super excited about it, saying how it could answer questions and help with making decisions. "It's totally safe," she assured me, seeing my hesitation. "There's no negative energy with this. It's just tapping into your own intuition or maybe some positive universal energy." I reluctantly agreed to try it out. The way it worked was simple. You hold the chain between your fingers, let the crystal hang freely, and ask yes or no questions. According to Jess, swinging in one direction meant yes, and another meant no. She demonstrated by asking if it would rain tomorrow. It swung for yes, and weirdly, it did rain the next day. We sat cross-legged on her living room floor, taking turns asking questions. Most were silly teenage girl stuff. Will I pass my math test on Monday? Does Ryan from biology like me? Will I get into the college I want? The pendulum swung back and forth, giving us answers that seemed random, but occasionally felt eerily accurate. After about 30 minutes of this, Jess got this mischievous look on her face. "Let's try something else," she said, her voice dropping dramatically. "Is this an evil spirit we're talking to?" The moment those words left her mouth, something changed. The air in the room felt heavier somehow, colder. I was about to tell her that wasn't funny when I noticed her face. She suddenly flinched, and her expression contorted like she was in pain. Her eyes welled up with tears. "What's wrong?" I asked, genuinely concerned. She looked at me with this panicked expression I'd never seen on her before. "I don't know," she whispered. I felt like, I don't know how to explain it, like something pinched me really hard on my shoulder, but from the inside. I didn't like this at all. Maybe we should stop. "Yeah," she agreed, quickly putting the pendulum back in its little velvet pouch. "Let's do something else." We tried to shake off the weird feeling by going to the kitchen to make snacks. We sat on the tiled floor with our backs against the cupboards, eating chips and listening to music on her phone. We were making up stupid rap lyrics and laughing, trying to forget what had happened earlier. That's when I saw it. I glanced up toward the kitchen doorway, and there was this shadow. Not like a normal shadow cast by an object. This was darker, more solid somehow. It slid, not walked, but slid, behind the corner wall near the door. It was tall, roughly the shape of a person but without clear features, just a mass of darkness. My heart jumped into my throat. I must have made a noise because Jess stopped mid-sentence. "We need to leave," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Now." "What? Why?" Jess looked confused. I couldn't even explain it properly. I just saw something by the door, like a shadow, but wrong. Jess looked over at the doorway and then back at me. I didn't see anything. "Please, can we just go upstairs or something?" I was already standing up, my legs shaky. It wasn't just what I'd seen, it was what I felt. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming. Not just from one direction, but from everywhere. Like something was all around us. The dread in my stomach was intense, making me feel physically sick with anxiety. Normally, when we had sleepovers, we'd camp out in her downstairs guest bedroom. All our stuff was already set up in there. Sleeping bags, pillows, our overnight bags. "But all our stuff is in the guest room," Jess protested. "I don't care. We can get it later." I was already heading for the stairs, not even checking if she was following me. I can't explain how I knew, but I felt absolutely certain that we needed to be upstairs, specifically near her brother. Like somehow his presence would keep whatever I'd sensed from following us. It wasn't logical. Kyle wasn't exactly the protective type, more the annoying older brother who teased us mercilessly, but the feeling was overwhelming. "This is stupid," Jess muttered, but she followed me up the stairs anyway. The second floor of Jess's house had 3 bedrooms, her parents' room, her room, and Kyle's. Kyle's door was closed, with the sound of gunfire from whatever game he was playing seeping through. We went into Jess's bedroom and I immediately felt a wave of relief wash over me. "Are you going to tell me what that was all about?" Jess asked, flopping down on her bed. I sat next to her, trying to organize my thoughts. "I really saw something, Jess, and after that thing with the pendulum, I just got scared." To my surprise, instead of arguing, Jess reached into her pocket and pulled out the velvet pouch with the pendulum. "What are you doing?" I asked, alarmed. "Why did you bring that up here?" "I want to see if it can tell us what happened," she said, already taking out the crystal. I was about to protest when I noticed something odd. The oppressive feeling from downstairs was completely gone. Up here, the air felt lighter, almost pleasant, and when Jess held up the pendulum, it didn't give me the same sense of dread as before. "It feels different now," I said, surprised by my own observation. "What do you mean?" Jess asked, holding the chain between her fingers. "I don't know. Downstairs it felt heavy, threatening, but now it's like it reminds me of my grandma's house, that kind of warm, safe feeling." Jess raised her eyebrows. "That's weird. Let's see what it says." She steadied her hand and asked, "Is there something negative in this house right now?" The crystal began to swing in the yes direction. "Is it downstairs?" she continued. "Yes." "Is it dangerous?" The pendulum moved in a circle before swinging to yes again. "Did we contact it with the pendulum earlier?" "Yes." My throat felt dry. "Ask if it would have hurt us if we stayed downstairs." Jess repeated my question, and the pendulum gave another yes. "Is there something protecting us up here?" Jess asked. "Yes." "Is it Kyle?" I suggested, thinking about my inexplicable certainty that we'd be safer near her brother. Jess asked, and surprisingly, the pendulum swung toward yes. "That doesn't make sense," Jess said, looking confused. "Kyle's just playing Call of Duty. He's not exactly a spiritual guardian." The pendulum kept swinging gently, and I had the strangest feeling that we were now communicating with something completely different than what we'd encountered downstairs. This energy felt feminine, almost elderly, like a grandmother watching over children. "Ask if there's something good up here with us," I said. Jess did, and the pendulum swung strongly to yes. "Is it different from what's downstairs?" "Yes." "Is the thing downstairs male?" I asked, trying to articulate the feeling I'd had. "Yes." "And is what's up here with us female?" "Yes." We looked at each other, goosebumps rising on my arms. The contrast was so clear, the malevolent masculine energy downstairs versus this benign, protective feminine presence up here. "We should ask if," Jess began, but she was interrupted by a loud thud from downstairs. We both froze. The sound had come from the guest bedroom where we'd left our things. "What was that?" Jess whispered. "I don't know," I replied, my heart pounding. "But I'm not going down there to find out." Kyle's door opened, and he stuck his head out. "Did you guys drop something?" "No," we both said at the same time. Kyle shrugged. "Whatever. I'm ordering pizza. You want some?" We nodded, and he went back into his room. Somehow, his brief appearance had broken the tension, and I felt even safer than before. We ended up spending the entire night in Jess's room, only going downstairs when Kyle did to get the pizza. We grabbed our overnight bags from the guest room as quickly as possible, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us from the corner of the room. The guest room felt cold, despite it being a warm spring night, and neither of us wanted to linger. The next morning, everything seemed normal again. Sunlight streamed through the windows, Jess's parents came home, and the whole house felt regular again. But I never felt comfortable in that guest bedroom again, and Jess and I never used the pendulum after that day. To this day, I can't explain why I knew we needed to go upstairs, or why I felt that Kyle would somehow protect us. I've never had any other psychic experiences or anything like that, but I know what I saw and felt that night, and sometimes when I'm falling asleep, I still see that dark shadow sliding across the wall, and I wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed downstairs. Story 20. I never thought I'd be sharing this story with anyone outside my family, but it's been bothering me for years, and I need to get it off my chest. Maybe someone here has experienced something similar and can help me make sense of it all. This happened when I was 16, living with my mom and stepdad in our ranch-style home in Pinewood. It was a pretty normal neighborhood, quiet streets, decent-sized yards, nothing special. My stepdad Dan worked for a moving company, and sometimes he'd bring home stuff that people didn't want anymore, usually just small things like books or kitchen gadgets that customers told him to trash. But this one time, about 7 years ago, he brought home something that would change everything. It was a hand-painted canvas of Marilyn Monroe. Not one of those mass-produced prints you'd find at Walmart, but an actual painting someone had done. The colors were super vibrant, almost too bright, with these weird purples and greens in the background that didn't quite match the rest of it. Marilyn's face was pretty accurate, but her eyes, I don't know how to explain it properly, but they seemed to follow you around the room. Not in that normal way that some portraits do, but more intensely. When Dan first brought it home, he was all excited about it. Look what I found. Someone was just going to throw this away. My mom, though, she had this immediate reaction to it. She didn't say much, just kind of frowned and said, "I don't like it." When Dan asked her why, she just shrugged and said, "I don't know. Something about it just feels off." I thought it was cool, though. I was going through this phase where I was really into classic Hollywood stuff, and Marilyn Monroe was iconic, you know? So when Mom made it clear she didn't want it hanging in the living room, I jumped at the chance to have it for my bedroom. My room was pretty basic. Blue walls, posters of bands I liked, a desk with my computer, and a twin bed against the wall. I hung the painting right above my bed that same evening. I remember standing back and thinking it looked good there, even though the bright colors didn't really match anything else in my room. That first night with the painting is when everything started. I went to bed around 11, normal time for a school night. I fell asleep pretty quickly, but then I had this nightmare, one of the worst I've ever experienced. I was in my room, but it wasn't quite right. Everything was twisted, like I was seeing it through a funhouse mirror. The walls were breathing in and out, and there was this heavy feeling on my chest, like someone was sitting on me. I couldn't move at all, completely paralyzed. The worst part was that I could feel something watching me from the painting. I couldn't see it because I couldn't turn my head, but I knew it was there, staring down at me. I woke up, gasping for breath, sweating like crazy. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might explode. It took me a few minutes to calm down enough to realize it was just a dream. I glanced up at the painting, and in the dim light from my window, it looked normal. I checked the time. 3:18 in the morning. I eventually fell back asleep, but it wasn't restful. The second nightmare came right after. This time, I was walking through our house, but all the rooms were connected differently. Like I'd walk through my bedroom door and end up in the garage, then through another door and be in the bathroom. No matter which way I went, I couldn't find my way out. And the whole time, I kept seeing glimpses of Marilyn's face in reflections, in windows, in puddles on the floor, in the TV screen. But it wasn't really her face. It was distorted, with this wide, unnatural smile that stretched way too far across her face. I woke up again, this time at 4:47. I was afraid to go back to sleep, so I just sat up in bed with my phone until my alarm went off at 6:30. I felt like crap all day at school. My friends noticed I was out of it, but I just told them I hadn't slept well. I mean, what was I supposed to say? "Hey, I think the painting in my room is giving me nightmares." They would have laughed their asses off. The second night was worse. I actually considered sleeping on the couch, but I didn't want to seem like a little kid afraid of the dark. So I went back to my room, got into bed, and tried not to look at the painting above me. This time, the nightmare was so vivid it still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. I was lying in my bed, just like in real life, when I felt it starting to sink. Not like the mattress was giving way, but like my entire bed was sinking through the floor. I tried to jump off, but I couldn't move. The bed just kept sinking lower and lower until it crashed through the ceiling of our basement. Our basement was unfinished, just concrete floors, exposed pipes, and a bunch of boxes and old furniture. In real life, it was directly under my bedroom. In the dream, My bed landed hard on the concrete, but I still couldn't get up. I was stuck there in the pitch-black basement, and I just knew, something was down there with me. I could hear it moving around in the dark, this scraping sound like claws on concrete. It was circling my bed, getting closer with each lap. I was finally able to move, and I scrambled off the bed, trying to make it to the stairs on the opposite side of the basement. The light switch was at the top of the stairs, so I was fumbling through complete darkness, knocking into boxes and old chairs. I could hear whatever it was getting closer behind me, moving faster now. I finally reached the bottom of the stairs and looked up, seeing the faint outline of the door at the top, and that's when I saw it, just for a split second, at the bottom step. It was small, maybe 3 feet tall, completely dark, but with these pale, glowing eyes. It didn't have a clear shape, more like a shadow, but solid somehow. I woke up with a jolt, my entire body drenched in sweat. My throat was raw, like I'd been screaming, but no one had come to check on me, so I guess I hadn't made any noise out loud. It was 2:23 in the morning. I turned on my bedside lamp and sat up against the headboard, looking at the painting. In the lamplight, Marilyn's smile seemed different, not warm or seductive like it should be, but knowing, like she was in on some joke I wasn't. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in the painting. The colors seemed even more vibrant than before, especially the reds around her lips. I didn't sleep anymore that night. I just sat there, watching the painting and waiting for morning. By the third day, I was a complete wreck. I'd barely slept for 2 nights, and I was starting to see things during the day, shadows moving in my peripheral vision, whispers just on the edge of hearing. During lunch at school, I nearly fell asleep face first in my mashed potatoes. My friend Jake shook me awake and asked if I was on something. I just told him I was having trouble sleeping. That afternoon, sitting in my last class of the day, I had this sudden realization. The nightmares had started the same night I hung up the painting. It seemed so obvious suddenly, but also ridiculous. I mean, it was just a painting, right? How could it possibly cause nightmares? But I couldn't shake the feeling. When I got home, my mom was in the kitchen making dinner. She took one look at me and asked what was wrong. I must have looked terrible. I haven't been sleeping, I admitted. I've been having these really bad nightmares. She immediately looked concerned and asked what kind of nightmares. I told her about them, especially the one about the basement. When I finished, she was quiet for a minute, then asked, "When did these start?" 3 nights ago, I said, the night I hung up that Marilyn Monroe painting. The look on her face changed. She didn't laugh or tell me I was being silly. Instead, she nodded slowly, like she'd been expecting this. "I didn't like that painting from the moment Dan brought it home," she said. "Something about it just felt wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it." We decided to test my theory. My mom suggested we move the painting to her and Dan's room for the night. If I slept fine and she had nightmares, we'd know it was the painting. I felt bad subjecting her to what I'd been going through, but she insisted. So that night, we moved the painting to their bedroom, hanging it on the wall opposite their bed. Dan thought we were both being ridiculous, but he went along with it. "It's just a painting," he kept saying. That night, I slept better than I had in days. No nightmares, no waking up in a cold sweat, just normal, restful sleep. The next morning, I found my mom sitting at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, looking exhausted. Dan had already left for work. "You had nightmares," I said. "It wasn't a question." She nodded. "3 of them, just like you. The last one," she shuddered. "I was in a room full of kittens. Normally that would be nice, right? But these kittens were sick, diseased. Their fur was falling out in patches, and they were making these awful sounds, not normal meows. They started climbing all over me, and I could feel their hot, feverish bodies against my skin. I couldn't move, couldn't get away from them, and the whole time I felt this presence, something watching and enjoying my fear." She looked up at me, her face pale. "That painting is leaving this house today." She didn't even wait for Dan to get home to discuss it. She took the painting down immediately, carried it outside, and put it in the trunk of her car. She didn't want it inside the house for even another minute. For a few days, the painting just stayed in her trunk. She told me later she'd been driving around with it, trying to figure out what to do with it. She didn't want to donate it somewhere because what if it affected someone else? She couldn't just throw it in our trash either. It felt too close. Finally, about a week after we moved it out of the house, she drove to a neighborhood on the other side of town and left it propped up against someone's garbage cans on their driveway. She said she felt guilty about it, but she just needed it gone. After that, the nightmares stopped completely for both of us. We never told Dan the full extent of what happened. He still thinks we were just being superstitious, but Mom and I know better. It's been 7 years, and I still think about that painting sometimes. I wonder where it is now, if someone else found it and took it home. I wonder if they're having nightmares too. Sometimes I even think about trying to track it down, but then I remember those dreams, especially that small dark thing at the bottom of the basement stairs, and I know it's better left alone. I've tried researching similar experiences online, but nothing quite matches what we went through. Has anyone else ever encountered an object that seemed to cause nightmares or other strange phenomena? I'm still trying to make sense of what happened, and sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing. But then I remember my mom had the exact same experience, and I know it was real. Whatever was in that painting, whatever came into our house with it, I'm just glad it's gone now. Story 21. I've never told anyone this story outside my family, and even they think I'm just remembering some childhood imagination thing. But I know what I saw that day, and it's bothered me for 20 years now. I grew up in rural Maine, about 30 minutes outside of Augusta, in a place where houses were so far apart you couldn't see your neighbors. Our house sat at the end of this long gravel road that branched off the main highway, with only about 5 other houses scattered along it. The rest was just dense pine forest stretching for miles. Growing up there, you get used to all kinds of sounds at night. Owls hooting, coyotes howling, sometimes even a moose crashing through the underbrush. My parents always taught me to respect the woods, but not to fear them. I spent most of my childhood exploring those forests during daylight hours, climbing trees, building forts, and generally doing what 10-year-old boys do when there aren't any other kids around for miles. This happened during summer break when I was 10. It was late July, one of those perfect Maine summer days. Not too hot, bright blue sky, just a light breeze rustling through the pines. My mom was busy canning vegetables from our garden, and I was bored out of my mind. I asked if I could ride my bike down our road, something I'd done hundreds of times before. "Be back before dinner," she said, barely looking up from the steaming pot of tomatoes she was working with. "And don't go past the main road." I grabbed my bike from the shed, this old Huffy with peeling blue paint that had been my older brother's before he outgrew it. The seat was ripped, and the handlebars were slightly crooked from when I'd crashed it the previous summer, but it still rode fine. Our road was perfect for biking. It was a dead end that stretched for about 2 miles before hitting the highway, with gentle hills that let you coast without having to pedal much. The best part was that cars rarely came down it, maybe 2 or 3 a day, so I could ride right down the middle without worrying. I had this routine where I'd ride all the way to the end, wave at Mr. Peterson, who was usually working in his garden at the last house, then turn around and head back. My Uncle Jim lived about halfway down the road, and sometimes I'd stop to see if he wanted to play catch or just chat, but that day I was feeling like a good long ride. I made it about 3/4 of the way down the road, just past the abandoned Davis place, when this feeling crept over me. It's hard to describe, like when you're home alone and suddenly feel like someone else is in the house with you. The hair on my arms stood up, and I got this sick, cold feeling in my stomach. I was passing a particularly dense section of forest on my right. The trees there grew closer together than usual, making it darker even in broad daylight. I remember slowing down, though I didn't really mean to. It was like my body sensed something before my mind did. That's when I looked over, kind of reluctantly, like when you know something bad is about to happen, but you have to look anyway. At first, I didn't see anything unusual, just the dark pines and undergrowth. But then something moved behind one of the larger trees about 20 yards in. I'll never forget what I saw. It wasn't a bear or a moose or anything I'd ever seen before. It was this thing, black and glossy, almost like oil or tar, but it moved with purpose. It was partially hidden behind a massive pine tree, but I could see it was roughly the size of a large man, though its shape wasn't quite right. It seemed to be peering around the tree at me, though I couldn't make out any eyes or face, just this dark, almost liquid-like mass. I froze for a second, my bike wobbling underneath me. The thing didn't move, but I could feel it watching me. That's what was most terrifying. I couldn't see eyes, but I absolutely felt its attention fixed on me, like a physical weight. Then my survival instinct kicked in, and I started pedaling as fast as I could. I didn't want to look back, but I couldn't help myself. When I glanced over my shoulder, my heart nearly stopped. The thing was moving parallel to me through the woods, keeping pace effortlessly. It didn't run like an animal. It sort of flowed from tree to tree, sometimes seeming to stretch or compress itself to navigate between them. It reminded me of how an octopus moves underwater, fluid and unnaturally graceful, except this was in the woods of Maine, not the ocean. I pumped my legs harder than I ever had before. My lungs burned and my thighs ached, but pure terror kept me going. The worst part was that I couldn't pedal without looking back every few seconds, and each time I did, the thing was still there, flowing through the trees, never breaking its pace. As I rounded a bend in the road, I realized I was approaching my Uncle Jim's house. It was a small cabin set back about 50 feet from the road, with a gravel driveway leading up to it. Uncle Jim wasn't really my uncle. He was my mom's cousin, but we always called him that. He was this gruff guy who worked at the paper mill and kept to himself most of the time. But he'd always been nice to me. I didn't even think twice. I skidded to a stop at the foot of his driveway, letting my bike crash to the ground as I sprinted toward his door. I remember the crunch of gravel under my sneakers and the way my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst through my chest. I pounded on his door, nearly sobbing with fear, constantly looking back toward the tree line. The thing had stopped at the edge of the woods across from Uncle Jim's house. It was partially hidden behind a tree again, but I could see it shifting, like it was debating whether to come closer. The door swung open, and there was Uncle Jim, with a cigarette dangling from his mouth, wearing an old flannel shirt despite the summer heat. "Oliver, what the hell's wrong with you, boy?" he asked, his eyebrows drawing together in concern. I was hyperventilating, pointing toward the woods, trying to form words through gasps. There's something in the woods. It was following me. It's not normal." Uncle Jim stepped out onto his porch, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the tree line. I tugged at his shirt, pointing frantically. "There, behind that big pine with the split trunk," I gasped. He stared for a long moment, then his face changed. It wasn't fear exactly, but something else. Recognition maybe, mixed with concern. Without saying a word, he gently pushed me into the house and followed, closing the door firmly behind us. "Stay here," he said, walking over to the gun cabinet in the corner of his living room. He unlocked it and pulled out a rifle, an old Remington that I'd seen him cleaning before but never actually use. "What is it?" I asked, my voice small and shaky. "Is it a bear?" Uncle Jim didn't answer right away. He went to the window and peered through the blinds, the rifle held ready in his hands. After what felt like forever, he turned back to me. "Probably just a bear," he said finally. But his voice was different, tighter, like he was choosing his words carefully. They get curious sometimes, especially if they smell food. "But it didn't move like a bear," I insisted, my fear giving way to confusion. It was like black goo or something, and it moved so fast, keeping up with my bike. Uncle Jim's jaw tightened, and he took a long drag from his cigarette before stubbing it out in an ashtray. "Bears can move plenty fast when they want to, faster than people think, and when the light hits their fur a certain way, it can look shiny." I knew he was lying, or at least not telling me everything. There was something in his eyes, worry, maybe even fear, that told me he knew exactly what I'd seen. "Why don't you call your mom? Tell her you're here," he suggested, still glancing occasionally toward the window. "I'll drive you home later. Your bike will be fine in the yard overnight." I called Mom from Uncle Jim's old rotary phone, my hands still shaking so badly I had to dial twice. While I talked to her, I noticed Uncle Jim step onto the porch again, the rifle still in his hands. Through the window, I could see him staring into the woods, scanning slowly from left to right. When I hung up, he was back inside, locking the door behind him. "Uncle Jim," I said, gathering my courage, "what was that thing? For real?" He looked at me for a long moment, then sighed heavily. "Sometimes the woods have things we don't understand, Oliver. Things best left alone." He placed his hand on my shoulder. "But you're safe here, and whatever it was, it's gone now." He wouldn't say anything more about it, no matter how much I pressed him. We spent the afternoon watching baseball on his small TV, and later he drove me home, my bike in the back of his pickup truck. He talked with my parents on the porch in hushed tones while I went inside, and when they came in, they acted like nothing had happened. Just said I got scared by a bear, probably, and that was that. But the next day, I noticed Uncle Jim's truck parked at the end of our driveway. He was sitting inside, smoking and watching the woods. When I waved, he nodded but didn't smile. He did that for 3 more days, always when I'd be outside playing before things finally went back to normal. I'm 30 now, with a life and career far from those Maine woods, but I've never forgotten what I saw that day, or the look on Uncle Jim's face when I described it. He passed away 5 years ago from lung cancer, taking whatever knowledge he had with him. Sometimes I think about going back, maybe asking some of the old-timers in the area if they've ever seen anything strange in those woods. But another part of me wonders if maybe some things are better left unknown. All I know for certain is that what I saw wasn't a bear, wasn't anything natural at all, and Uncle Jim knew it too.